Chapter 1474. The battle between Han Fei and Ren Tianfen was simply a feast full of violent aesthetics. At first, when the two of them first fought, Han Fei habitually dodged with all kinds of techniques. He used the desolate god body and the various body techniques of the 64-dimensional fish dragon dance. The reason why he fought like this was that Han Fei was still a little traumatized. After all, Ren Tianfen had specially trained him for 2 months. At that time, he was still in the level 3 fishery and was beaten miserably every day. Therefore, knowing Ren Tianfen's style, he certainly wouldn't let him find any flaws. Otherwise, it would not be easy for him to turn the tables when the punches came one after another without any chance to catch his breath. However, after Han Fei used all these methods, Ren Tianfei's strength suddenly rose to the advanced venerable realm with a swish. Han Fei immediately cursed. "Shameless old man, you're cheating." Ren Tianfen's voice was like thunder. "I'm cheating? I just want to teach you one thing, and that is, a single person can defeat 10 people. So many fancy tricks. When you meet a real expert, are you going to rely on these tricks to fight?" Han Fei sneered. "Old man, I not only have these tricks, but also the strongest body. Come on. BM, 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 BM." With a thought, Han Fei activated the Great Way, increased his strength by 3 times, and suddenly jumped to the level of a junior venerable. Although there was still a gap between him and Ren Tianfen, he had the indestructible golden body, so he could still fight. At this time, the two of them punched each other, depending on who was faster and fiercer. Their styles and methods were indeed quite similar. Han Fei's strength at this time was at the level of a junior venerable. Of course, he couldn't compare with Ren Tianfen. At most, he could exert the power of an intermediate venerable at most, and most of his moves were still stuck at the level of a beginner venerable. Han Fei was no longer able to increase his strength. Han Fei had a hunch that if he forcibly used his power of the Great Way, he wouldn't be able to have 4 times the strength. Otherwise, it would be too unbelievable. Bam, bam, bam. In the blink of an eye, Han Fei had been punched dozens of times. Every punch made Han Fei's internal organs tremble. It was really not a solution to go on like this. However, in terms of style, it was really Ren Tianfen style. Roar! Han Fei roared and activated the 100 Beasts soul-suppressing roar. A layer of golden light appeared on his body and enveloped him. "Hey, stinking brat. This time, I'll tell you that living a long life isn't without its benefits. In terms of the power of the divine soul, you can't be considered a top prodigy. At the same level, my soul power is about twice as strong as yours." Bang! Han Fei felt that his spirit was about to explode, and his eyes, nose, and mouth were bleeding. Han Fei gritted his teeth and grunted. With the help of the invincible will, golden fist marks smashed down like a storm. While bombarding, Han Fei asked, "The longer you live, the stronger your soul will be. How high can it go?" Ren Tianfei didn't give in at all. He fought back with his fists and punched out 7 or 8 big fist marks that were as powerful as the sacrificing punch, blowing Han Fei dozens of kilometers away. Ren Tianfei said, "That's not accurate. Not everyone could keep improving their divine soul power. In order to improve one's soul power, one needed to dig out one's own body's potential. The deeper one dug, the stronger the container of the divine soul would be. The other was to keep using the visualization diagram for a long time. The more advanced the visualization diagram is, the better the spiritual power can be improved, but there will be a limit." As he spoke, Han Fei had returned with his stellar passage technique. The two of them bombarded each other again. The two of them fought, and blood splashed. But how much skill did they need? You might not be able to tell, but it was like 2 drunkards fighting each other. The two of them fought back and forth, and Han Fei lost more than he won. Han Fei said, "The second half of the indestructible body art should be to integrate the power of the soul into the body of flesh and blood. Merging the two is the ultimate way of the indestructible body art, isn't it?" Ren Tianfei laughed and said, "You're quite smart, kid. As you said, you've already comprehended the cultivation method of the indestructible body art. First of all, your body must be indestructible, and in fact, your soul must be indestructible. If you want your soul to be indestructible, the best way is to hide it in any corner of your body. Seizing the opportunity, Han Fei took Ren Tianfei's punch head-on. With a smile, he punched out and blew Ren Tianfei back 100 meters. Swallowing a mouthful of blood, Han Fei gasped. Your method seems to have scattered my brain and integrated it into every corner of my body. Are you saying that my whole body is full of brains? Ren Tianfei sneered. I don't have time to talk nonsense with you. Your current physical strength is indeed not weak. Now that you've embarked on the invincible realm, you're even stronger. However, although your soul power may be about twice as much as ordinary people's, this part of the soul power can be made up for through persistent cultivation, visualization, and long-term cultivation. However, this part of the soul power can be made up for through persistent cultivation, visualization, and long-term cultivation. Therefore, anyone can do it. Therefore, the power of your divine soul is not the most top-notch kind. If you have a chance in the future, go find more ownerless souls. Bam! 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 Their fists collided, and they both retreated thousands of meters. Han Fei took a breath and said, the ownerless souls can be killed by venerables, but how strong is the soul? Ren Tianfei said leisurely, everyone's limit is different. You shouldn't ask me about this. You should ask yourself. If you don't know how strong your soul power is now, it's not a big problem. In the future, find your Taoist heart. What is the great path in your heart? Where's your great path? How should you walk on it? The Taoist heart ultimately determines the limit of the soul. Han Fei's pupils suddenly constricted. This was the first time that he had heard someone else talk about the Taoist heart apart from the old turtle. In Han Fei's body, the old turtle said, Han Fei, look, this is the difference. This old guy knows the meaning of the Taoist heart. You're the only one who's always chasing after increasing your strength. In fact, you are improving too fast. Even if you don't think about the Taoist heart now, when you become a venerable, do you want to become a king? If your Taoist heart is not strong enough, it won't work. Han Fei calmly asked Ren Tianfei, what is the Taoist heart? Ren Tianfei was accumulating power, and terrifying energy was gathering on his fists. The Taoist heart, the Taoist heart. There is nothing to worry about, and there is nothing to fear on the road ahead. Find your own meaning of life. Walk on the only great path that can let you walk until you die. Be firm and never give up. That is the Taoist heart. Hearing Ren Tianfei's explanation, Han Fei thought to himself. The old turtle couldn't help but say, I have to say that you human beings are really eloquent. That's pretty much it, but you must not take what he said as the standard. What he said is all right. However, the Tao heart is far more complicated than these few sentences. After hearing Ren Tianfei's explanation and the old turtle's advice, Han Fei actually understood these truths. However, did he want Han Fei to have an unwavering Taoist heart now? Han Fei really couldn't do that for the time being. The key was that old Han and the others had paved the road for too long. Han Fei's own growth had been completely planned by them. Especially after he learned all this, he felt very upset and lost the sense of accomplishment he had before. However, it would be a lie to say that Han Fei didn't have any faith. Han Fei still had a lot of things to do. First of all, he had to find a way to cross the boundless sea, find the mermaids, beat up Chen Huangdian, and take Xia Xiaochan away. Han Fei felt that his idea was very domineering. Chen Huangdian, that be Astra-starred, almost killed him back then. If he didn't get revenge, he wouldn't be able to get rid of the anger in his heart. As for the rest, was it really for the sake of the human race, for the sake of dealing with the Sea clan? Han Fei really didn't. In war, there was no right or wrong. However, in their respective worlds, right and wrong always existed. Sea demons weren't ruthless, nor were human beings sentient. It could only be said that he happened to be born in the human race, so he had to stand on the side of the human race. No matter what kind of creatures they were, they would unite in times of crisis, which was a common trait. Even if this principle was correct, didn't the human race also have people like the aristocratic families? They were more concerned about their own interests. Did he want them to risk their lives for the survival of the human race? That was just wishful thinking. At this moment, Han Fei thought to himself that maybe he should study how to nurture his so-called faith after he became a venerable. Half a day later, Han Fei and Ren Tianfen fought more than 3,000 rounds. Most importantly, Han Fei was beaten up. Han Fei was lost for words. Olby asterisk starred. I think you're just making fun of me. Why don't you lower your strength and let's practice again? Ren Tianfen sneered. What do you think? I just want to beat you up a few more times before you become a king. If you really become a king in the future, I'm a man who has beaten a king before. Han Fei's eyelids twitched. So, you still don't think I can become a king, do you? Ren Tianfen glanced at Han Fei in disdain. You haven't even become a venerable yet. Is it appropriate to talk about being a king? What do you think a king is? You think you can become one just because you wanna? Even the king's tribulation is extremely difficult. By the way, with your cultivation speed, I'm afraid you'll have to consider the king's tribulation after you become a venerable. Han Fei smiled. You have no experience in this. What about the king's tribulation? I'm afraid there's only one person in the entire Yin-Yang heaven who has experience in it. Han Fei was talking about Tang Yen. Han Fei felt that this guy was very unusual. In order to transcend the king's tribulation, he created a cloud whale clone. However, this clone failed to transcend the king's tribulation and was killed. Now, he didn't give up and created another cloud whale clone. Not only did he create a cloud whale clone, but he also wanted to transcend the king's tribulation this time. Even if he failed this time, he still had the identity of Tang Gu. Han Fei sighed sincerely. In the world of the strong, it was really not easy to die. As the saying goes, a cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. These people were not kings yet, but they had already created one reincarnation after another for themselves. Even Han Fei himself knew how the so-called reincarnation came about. As Ren Tianfen said, he could directly deprive part of his soul power and all his memories, stuff the pure memories into a brand new body, and let it grow naturally. Under the influence of the environment, he would gradually become a new strong master. Just thinking about it made Han Fei's blood freeze. Did he watch himself become another person? Then, in the end, he became himself again? Ren Tianfen suddenly rose, shook his messy hair, and said casually, Let's go to the temple and have a look. Be careful of the eye of the heavenly path. That thing can corrode the divine palace. Now, you can kill all the puppets in the divine palace. Chapter 1475. The Central Holy City was a place where kings lived. Under normal circumstances, that temple was empty. Everyone in the Central Holy City knew that. According to Old Ren, a long time ago, when it was most prosperous, the Central Holy City would be open to the Thousand-Star City once a year. At that time, tens of millions of humans could come to the Central Holy City to admire the miracles. After crossing the heavenly river, there was a temple in the center that looked a bit like a temple of heaven. There were a lot of stairs in all directions, and the circular temple was quite large. It was also a 3-story building. Han Fei couldn't help but wonder, why are they all 3 stories? Ren Tianfen was stunned for a moment. What else are 3 stories? Han Fei shook his head. Nothing. I mean, is this where I'm going to live? Ren Tianfen sneered. You're going to live here? Why don't you take a look at yourself? Do you have the nerve to live here? Han Fei said in disdain. Why would I have a nerve to live here? This is my territory after all. Ren Tianfen said proudly. The king's inheritance depends on who is capable. Everyone is paving the way for you, but you have to become a king first. Take Tang Yen, for example. If he becomes a king before you and takes over the divine palace, this might be his. Han Fei looked at the sky and said, Isn't that thing still there? How can Tang Yen become a king? Ren Tianfen shrugged. That's the truth. If it weren't for that thing, do you think anyone would wait for you to become a king? Besides, since that thing can stop others from becoming kings, it might be able to stop you too. You have to be prepared for that. Han Fei said casually, I'm not in a hurry. I haven't become a venerable yet, so I can keep that thing for a while. When I become a half-king, I'll find a way to get it. In a sense, The Eye of the Heavenly Path bought time for Han Fei. If it weren't for the Eye of the Heavenly Path, people like Old Monster Chu, Old Han, the Thug Patriarch, and Tang Yin wouldn't have been able to become kings. The two of them entered the temple. The bottom floor of the temple was nearly 100 meters high, and there was only a statue of the sea god. However, unlike all the sea god statues that Han Fei had seen, this sea god statue here was sitting very dignified and dignified. Also, in terms of demeanor and appearance, this was the first time that Han Fei had seen his mother when she was a king. The statue had shoulder-length hair that was slightly curled and fell to the back of its neck. The space between her eyebrows opened up, an array of golden light resembling a sword shot out. Her cheeks were slightly thin and angular, and she had the demeanor of an empress who ruled the world. Han Fei had seen his mother in the illusion of the sea-quelling painting before. However, at that time, she was just a beautiful woman, not a king at all. Ren Tianfei said, "Few people can make it here to pay their respects." Han Fei frowned and said, "King Cheng, isn't it just cultivation? Why do you insist on paying your respects?" Ren Tianfei smiled. "You don't understand. Back in that era, the myriad races didn't have much confidence. The king was their belief, their hope. They gave all their faith to the king. Can you understand this feeling? In this case, if the king can still show his divine skills from time to time for all people to admire, as time goes by, people will gain confidence." Han Fei asked, "How much power of faith do people need to admire?" Ren Tianfei nodded. "It's all mutual. The power of faith can help the king become stronger, and the king can enhance the confidence of all people. No one wins or loses here, but everyone makes a profit. The power of faith also has a limit. That's what your mother told me. What's the specific limit? I don't know. After all, not everyone can become a king." Han Fei and Ren Tianfei went to the second floor. As they walked, Han Fei asked, "Can't one become a king without the power of faith? If you really want to put it that way, then in this boundless sea region, there are tens of thousands of races, but only a few kings can appear, right?" Ren Tianfei said, "Of course not. There was a difference between King Cheng and King Cheng. Some people walked the righteous path of heaven and earth, walking the path of grandeur. Becoming a king is just a beginning, a beginning. Some people become a king only because they have enough strength and opportunities and have passed the king's tribulation. If you want to go further, then you have to continue to fight and look for opportunities." Han Fei wondered, "What's the difference?" Ren Tianfei said, "As the king of a clan, even if you sit and accept faith every day, you can eventually become a king. Do you know what it means to become a king? It's the realm after the king." Han Fei said, "I know. Are you saying I can become a king by sitting down?" Han Fei's heart trembled violently. Damn it, is there such a good thing in the world? It's already so difficult to become a king, but someone can become a king by sitting down? The old turtle's voice sounded in Han Fei's heart. Humph, how can there be such a good thing in the world? In fact, it's all the same. It's not so difficult to become a king, just because your domain is guarded by the Big Eye. Otherwise, there may have been more than one king by now. Even the old man in front of you can probably pass the king's tribulation. He said it's possible to become a king by sitting down. But think about it. How can a king who fights his way up be the same as a king who sits down? Han Fei felt that the old turtle had a point. Even if one could become a king by sitting down, it wouldn't be solid enough. That was a sovereign that was created from the power of will, so there was no reason for it to be stronger than the others who had fought their way up. However, the old turtle said again, "Of course, there are benefits too. Not everyone could break through the heavens and become an emperor after becoming a king. Besides, such a king who walks on the path of faith can gather the faith of thousands of people in his own territory, which is indeed impressive. However, if he leaves his territory, his strength may be greatly reduced." Han Fei pondered for a moment. So this was the reason why the Life Queen and the others refused to leave their territory? As they walked, Han Fei saw that the second floor was in a mess, and there were many wine jars rolling randomly on the ground. Ren Tianfei said, "Well, I live on this floor. I don't have much to do. I just sleep meditate, and so on. Let's go to the third floor. The entrance to the Divine Palace is on the third floor. Han Fei. Han Fei was amused. He didn't expect that Old Man Rin lived in the temple. Rin Tianfei seemed to know what Han Fei was thinking and immediately said, I am a controller after all. Although my strength hasn't fully recovered, I was the strongest person below the king level in the past. It's not a problem for me to conquer the 1,000-star city alone. Han Fei glanced at him contemptuously. Okay, I'll believe you. By the way, what's your injury? I have a great technique that might be able to cure you completely. Rin Tianfei grinned. Forget it. It's just an apocalyptic divine technique. What you're walking on is not the apocalyptic divine technique. It's not as powerful as the real apocalyptic divine technique. You want to cure my injury as a semi-sovereign? That's just wishful thinking. When you reach the half-monarch realm, you might be able to use this technique to cure me. Since Rin Tianfei didn't ask for it, Han Fei wouldn't insist on it. Since Rin Tianfei thought that he hadn't walked on the apocalyptic divine technique, he would let him think that way for a while longer. When he became a venerable, he would be scared to death. On the third floor, Han Fei saw that the entire floor was surrounded by some golden lines. Obviously, this was a teleportation array. At least, judging from the level of the teleportation array, the complex golden patterns, and the weird pattern structure, it should be much stronger than the one in the Shuimu heaven. The place where the immortal palaces were located was a place that ordinary people couldn't reach. It was hidden in space gaps and was difficult to find. Besides, among the immortal palaces, there were strong and weak ones. The Life Queen once said, Yin and Yang, colored glass, golden crow, dragons subduing. From her words, Han Fei felt that the level of the yin-yang heaven might not be low or even very high. After all, when the Life Queen said this, she didn't say that they were not ranked first. Looking at the teleportation array, Rin Tianfei said, This yin-yang palace is the last test for you. It's not that we don't have the ability to clean it, but if we clean it, we may pay a much greater price than you do. That thing is more lethal to us than it is to you. The stronger you are, the greater the threat you will face. Remember, if you don't have to use your full power, then don't. That thing is very blind. Han Fei was dumbfounded. Why do I feel that thing is alive? Rin Tianfei smiled. What do you think? It's not an exaggeration to say that it's alive. It's like an eye of the heavens, monitoring all living beings. But if something goes wrong, it will pop up and cause trouble. Han Fei asked one last question. I've never understood why it only appeared in our yin-yang heaven. Why didn't it go to other places in the 36 immortal palaces? Rin Tianfei looked at Han Fei weirdly. That's your question. Do you think stealing time counts as going against the heavens? Han Fei's lips twitched. That makes sense. I've stolen a portion of the age of chaos and sealed it up. Did the heavenly way really not notice it at all? It's like I'm a king. If I find that someone steals from my place, will I still trust him? Thinking of this, Han Fei couldn't help but smile bitterly. Then can this thing be driven away? Rin Tianfei shrugged. I don't know. I'm just a controller, not a king. I can control the central holy city, but I can't control the immortal palaces. It's useless to ask me about this. You have to figure it out yourself. Han Fei smiled. Okay, I'll go by myself. Han Fei quickly walked to the center of the array, and spiritual energy surged under him. In an instant, a large number of golden vein patterns were activated. When the golden light flashed, the scene in front of Han Fei suddenly changed. What was even more surprising than the change in front of him was that Han Fei felt a terrifying temperature coming at him like an avalanche. Wow. Oh my God. Chapter 1476. Han Fei couldn't believe the scene in front of him. Is this the legendary Immortal Palace? After seeing the Water-Wood Immortal Palace, Han Fei felt that no one had entered the Yin-Yang Palace for such a long time. Maybe the spiritual energy, there was a disaster, and the spiritual fruits had grown for tens of thousands of years. But now it seemed that this was not the case at all. In Han Fei's eyes, the flames were a disaster. As far as the eye could see, it was like hell, and there was lava everywhere. Although the spiritual energy here was indeed bursting, the spiritual energy here was extremely violent, as if there were spiritual energy explosions happening all the time. In the sky, there was a huge big eye, and a magma waterfall was flowing down from the eye. It looked as if he was crying tears of blood. In just an instant, the clothes on Han Fei's body had been burned to ashes. The terrifying temperature was even hotter than when Han Fei drilled through the mantle magma in the water with heaven. Of course, at this moment, he had already reached the level of a semi-venerable. The indestructible golden body had also been completely shaped. Although the temperature was scorching, it couldn't hurt him at all. In these flames, Han Fei saw some figures. These figures were either lying, sitting, or lying on the ground. Han Fei could feel strong power from them. Puppets. Han Fei thought to himself. The old turtle said, Han Fei, this place doesn't look very good. Han Fei rolled his eyes. This isn't just King not good. It's simply breaking all the beautiful expectations in my heart. This place is simply a mess. The Immortal Palace is even more dangerous than hell. Originally, Han Fei was in high spirits, hoping to reap a bountiful harvest here. But now it seemed that not only couldn't he take back anything, but he also seemed to have to take out a lot of treasures. Huff! With a thought in Han Fei's mind, Little Black and Little White appeared beside him. These two little guys seemed to be taken aback. However, seeing that their master was here, they were immediately relieved. For the two of them, this terrifying temperature of the flames couldn't hurt them at all. It was just that Little White was a little unhappy. However, this time, Han Fei didn't put Little White into Forge the Universe. Instead, he said, Daughter, take a breath of the violent spiritual energy here and eat as much as you can. Son, these terrifying flames belong to you now. Didn't you say that the scorching flame was lacking? This time, you can eat your fill. Little Black and Little White's bodies began to expand. Then, both of them opened their mouths wide and began to swallow crazily. At this moment, Han Fei saw that the eyeball of the heavenly path magic eye in the sky seemed to move and glance in his direction. Han Fei took a deep breath. Ren Tianfei once said that other people had to pay a much greater price to become a king than he did. It must be because they were fighting against the eye of heaven's path. His cultivation was too low, so the difficulty that the heaven's path law I imposed on him wouldn't be too great. Now, it was a complete mess. The entire Immortal Palace was filled with domineering flame essence, burning Han Fei's whole body. This meant that the challenge had come. Sure enough, Han Fei sensed that more and more puppets appeared in the flames. Although Little Black and Little White were already trying their best to swallow. However, the two of them were not strong enough. Even if they used all their strength, they could only form a vortex. And the rampaging energy, spiritual energy, and fire elements in the Yin-Yang Palace were too much. Swish, a puppet stepped out, holding a rusty long knife in its hand, and slashed at Han Fei. The might of this saber strike was filled with an extremely special power. It did not seem like the destructive power that an explorer could casually send out. Huff! Han Fei took a breath of energy and punched, ready to crush the figure together with the long saber. Han Fei didn't use his power of the Great Path. The reason was that the Eye of Heaven's Path was watching him. If he used a stronger power, would the Eye of Heaven's Path increase the difficulty? However, although it was not the sacrificing punch, Han Fei's punch was still unparalleled. Although Han Fei had crushed the long saber in the puppet's hand, this punch seemed to have hit an iron mountain. Although the puppet's body was distorted, it was not crushed. Wow, what a strong physique. The old turtle couldn't help but say, these puppets have been tempered by this strong fire element all day long. I don't know how many tens of thousands of years they have been refined. Maybe their strength is not good, but I'm afraid none of them are weak in terms of physical strength. Gulp. Han Fei swallowed. I forgot to ask, how many puppets are there in the Immortal Palace? After seeing the water-wood Immortal Palace, Han Fei felt that it was not big, only a few dozen kilometers long. At this moment, Han Fei's perception swept out, but he could only scan a kilometer away. Han Fei said, Old Yuan, how big is this Immortal Palace? How many puppets are there? Hardly had Han Fei asked the question when he saw a red laser coming at him from the eye of the heavenly path in an instant. Han Fei didn't even have time to react. Who knew that the eye of heaven's path would suddenly attack like this? Han Fei didn't even have time to step on the array and was hit hard by the blow. Han Fei rolled on the ground for thousands of meters away. His body was badly mutilated, his internal organs were rolling, and all his hair was burned. Even his bones were aching faintly. The old turtle said in horror, "No, it can feel my power." As soon as my soul power probed, it was all obliterated. It even intended to destroy me directly. Han Fei was shocked. This is 2F*King much. Does it mean that the old turtle can't attack? Swish, swish, with a thought, Han Fei directly stored Little Black and Little White into Forge the Universe at the same time. Because those puppets began to move. If these puppets were easy to deal with, Little Black and Little White would be fine. But now it seemed that none of the puppets here were easy to deal with. With so many terrifying forces, who can resist them on the sea demon battlefield? Han Fei was speechless. These puppets were now attacking crazily. For a time, spears were like dragons, knives were shining, and swords were slashing at Han Fei. Clank, clank, clank. After setting up a defensive array for himself, Han Fei tried to control these puppets with the void lines. However, when the void lines buckled these puppets, Han Fei immediately saw a big bleeding eye, which seemed to be the eye of heaven's path. Puff! At that moment, Han Fei bled from his eyes, nose, and mouth. The blood instantly evaporated in the flames, and then was sucked back by Han Fei along with its energy. Han Fei was horrified. It's over. All the puppets here are finished. They either didn't have souls or were ownerless residual souls, retaining some instinctive consciousness. But now it seemed that these souls had all been contaminated by the eye of heaven's path, and none of them could be saved. Under the 100 Beasts' soul-suppressing roar, the three puppets around Han Fei seemed to have their souls shattered and collapsed. Seeing this, Han Fei was overjoyed. Yes, he could attack with his soul. Even if he could crush these puppets, it wouldn't do him any good. But if he destroyed their souls, then their puppet bodies could still be used. For example, the soul-splitting technique was the most basic control method. If he separated a wisp of his soul, these puppets would be under his control. Of course, the only disadvantage of this method was that he would have to divide a lot of his soul power. Divine Stab. Fortunately, the God-scaring painting had been completed, and the God-scaring stab had been completely transformed into the Divine Stab. It was just that he wasn't proficient in it yet. After all, Han Fei hadn't used it recently. Now he could use it to deal with these guys. A puppet without a soul was just a puppet. Therefore, with a thought, Han Fei collected the three puppets in a Forge the Universe just like collecting an item. However, Han Fei didn't feel happy for long. Although he had enough strength to kill the corroded souls of these puppets. However, there were too many puppets here. No matter how strong Han Fei was, he didn't use the power of the Great Path, so he only had a strong physique. And these puppets in front of him, in terms of physique alone, almost all exceeded half of venerable being. Thousands of puppets attacked at the same time. No matter how strong Han Fei was, he could only run around the Divine Palace and fight while running. If he had to fight head-on, Han Fei would be hammered unconscious by these puppets at most 10 minutes. Han Fei's soul attack methods were limited after all. In addition to the 100 Beasts' soul-suppressing roar, he could only use the Divine Stab. The void lines could deal with the enemy, but against the eye of the Great Path, he would be injured first. At this time, he couldn't use it all. The old turtle was in Han Fei's body, so he said leisurely, "Maybe your strength is too low. This should just be the instinctive defense mechanism of the eye of the Great Path. So, it shouldn't be difficult for you to subdue these puppets." Han Fei said, "I'm afraid that some of these puppets have developed their own consciousness in the past tens of thousands of years." Han Fei remembered the example of the water fairy. If there were venerable realm puppets, it would be hard to defeat them. The old turtle said, "I don't think so. The eye of the Great Path is here. Do you think it can tolerate the birth of a new consciousness? Even if it is born, I'm afraid it will be immediately obliterated. That's why I said it's not difficult to subdue these puppets. It'll just take a little more time. A few days will be enough. Han Fei sneered. A few days? Now, the number of puppets that appeared in his perception had exceeded 1,000. Even in the Shuimu's sky, this power was an incomparably powerful force. The fierce battle continued, and the interior of the Yin Palace was riddled with holes. However, as Han Fei ran, he found that something was wrong. He seemed to have run to the center of the Divine Palace. He saw a large palace quietly standing amidst the dense fire elemental energy. Huh, this palace is sealed? Even the Eye of the Great Path can't break the seal? Chapter 1477. Han Fei was wondering if there was a palace in this place that was not polluted by the Eye of the Heavenly Path. Presumably, this palace was probably left to him by his mother. So, without hesitation, Han Fei bumped into the seal of the palace. Generally speaking, this kind of seal should be able to distinguish the aura of the intruder. In fact, Han Fei was not sure. However, a seal was not enough to eat him. So, without the slightest hesitation, Han Fei bumped into it. Han Fei felt that he had bumped into an iron mountain, and his whole body was almost flattened. However, the seal did not weaken at all, nor could he get in easily. A lot of bombardment followed. With a flash, Han Fei appeared 1,000 meters away and circled around the palace. However, to Han Fei's disappointment, there was no entrance or exit on this seal. He had tried 5, 6, 7, 8 times, but not once had he managed to enter. Han Fei even flew to the top to take a look. However, he still didn't find any entrance. The old turtle said, "Maybe the way you entered is wrong. After all, this used to be the residence of a king. You are still far from becoming a king. Even if many people think you can become a king, you're not one now. It's normal that the seal doesn't recognize you. If you have the strength, you might as well kill those puppets first. It seems that this is not a job that ordinary people can do. Fortunately, I didn't come until now. If I came earlier, I would have been beaten to death by these puppets. Oh no, even if a junior venerable came, I am afraid that they would also die. Their physiques are not as strong as these puppets." 3 days later, Han Fei activated the war body technique and swallowed the souls of more than 1,300 puppets in these 3 days. Han Fei was very impatient. In the past 3 days, he was simply a fighting machine, and his mental state was extremely exhausted. The spiritual fruits in Forge the Universe had been consumed by him. If these puppets were just ordinary demi-venerables, it would be fine. However, what were these things? These were all mindless machines, unkillable cockroaches. Other than using mental attacks to deal with them one by one, if he were to rely on absolute strength to fight them, he would have been crippled long ago. However, it was fortunate that these were puppets. If he wasn't a puppet, but a conscious person, he would have been slaughtered long ago. Whoosh! The Immortal Palace did not occupy a large area. It should only be about the same size as the Waterwood Immortal Palace. A total of 1,302 puppets were wiped out by Han Fei. Bang! Han Fei lay on the ground and gasped for air. With a thought, Little Black and Little White appeared. Han Fei said, "Son, daughter, swallow it slowly and carefully. Swallow the spiritual energy and energy of this damn place clean." Han Fei cleaned up these puppets. The Eye of Heaven's path didn't do anything out of the ordinary either. Perhaps in the eyes of the heavenly Tao Dharma Eye, these puppets were just small fries. Perhaps they were like ants on the ground. If they were gone, then so be it. They were not worth paying attention to. And the strength that Han Fei showed was only that of a semi-venerable, which had nothing to do with the strength of a king. Therefore, the big eyeball did nothing except glancing at Han Fei occasionally. After the battle, the endless and violent spiritual energy began to spontaneously pour into Han Fei's body. After all, Han Fei had transcended the mortal meridians, so spiritual energy and energy would automatically drill into his body. Even if Han Fei didn't do anything but just lay down, his body would be filled with spiritual energy in half an hour at most. Fortunately, Little Black and Little White, one on the left and one on the right, were swallowing frantically. Whoosh! Han Fei had just laid down for less than a quarter of an hour, and the bodies of Little Black and Little White began to tremble slightly. Han Fei was stunned. Little Black and Little White couldn't go any further. If they went any further, they would have to go through a tribulation. Han Fei didn't know how these two little guys were going to go through the tribulation. For a long time, Han Fei had forgotten to ask this question. Did the tribulation of spiritual beasts have anything to do with their masters? At this moment, information emerged in Han Fei's eyes. Name: twin yin-yang spirits swallowing fish evolving. Introduction. This is the descendant of the mysterious yin-yang sky-swallowing fish from ancient times. The black and white fishes are born together. The white fish is docile, while the black fish is cruel. They are symbiotic. As long as one is alive, the other will not die. Level 69, quality mysterious, stores spiritual energy, evolving, food. Omnivorous, can swallow anything, battle skills. Supreme yin-yang wheel, spirit-devouring body. Fusion, Gemini divine technique. Note: the black fish cannot be seen. Except for the owner. Only those with the yin-yang divine eyes born by heaven and earth can see through it. After fusing, their battle prowess would increase greatly, comparable to a divine weapon. Contained soul power. Evolving. Han Fei's heart trembled. Are Little Black and Little White going to transcend their tribulation? Wait, is it really okay to undergo tribulation in this godforsaken place? Han Fei quickly said, Old Yuan, will there be any accidents when my naturally endowed spiritual beast transcends the tribulation under the gaze of the eye of the heavenly path? Han Fei had no experience in this regard. I wonder what this heavenly Tao Dharma eye is. Who knew what it was trying to monitor? It's weird that it keeps looking at people like this. The old turtle said leisurely, How does a connate Taoist aptitude body transcend the tribulation? I don't know either. They are Taoist aptitude bodies, so it's the same whether they transcend the tribulation or not. Because they are the embodiment of the way of heaven. They are a part of the way of heaven. If they transcend the tribulation, I always feel that the way of heaven is transcending itself. Han Fei was dumbfounded. So? The old turtle said grumpily, I'm not omnipotent. I'm a turtle, and I spend most of my time sleeping. Besides, the world is so big, and there's a limit to what I know. If a naturally endowed spiritual beast needs to transcend a tribulation, the owner should be able to replace it, because you're in a symbiotic relationship. If your naturally endowed spiritual beast dies, it will greatly damage your foundation. If the owner dies, the naturally endowed spiritual beast will also die. So, according to my experience, it should be replaceable. Hearing this, Han Fei immediately breathed a sigh of relief. As long as it could be replaced, the real strength of Little Black and Little White hadn't reached the level of explorers yet. If there was a tribulation that they couldn't guard against, they would have to face it themselves. Seeing that the eye of heaven didn't respond to him, Han Fei continued to lie for a while. 1 hour later. At this time, Little Black and Little White had completely stopped devouring spiritual energy and fire energy. The amount they had devoured so far might not even be 1% of the energy and fire energy escaping from the entire yin-yang fairy palace. But Han Fei didn't panic at all. Just now, he asked Little Black and Little White to devour spiritual energy to provide them with enough energy. More importantly, he needed a rest. After 3 days of crazy fighting, his body had been hammered thousands of times, and his bones were almost broken. He could already be considered inhuman to be able to kill 1,302 puppets. At this moment, Han Fei felt that he hadn't fully recovered and wanted to continue to lie for a while. However, the bodies of Little Black and Little White suddenly began to flicker. From the looks of it, was he really going to advance? Han Fei was a little stunned. Is what the old turtle said true? A connate Taoist aptitude body doesn't need to transcend a tribulation? Bada. Suddenly, Han Fei raised his head, only to see that in the distant sky, the eye of heaven's path blinked. In the eye of heaven, there was a vortex of flames. He didn't know if it was triggered by the breakthrough of Little Black and Little White. Han Fei's heart skipped a beat. He wondered if he should put Little Black and Little White away. He could make a breakthrough at any time. He should be able to make a breakthrough in the Soul Sea. However, what if the Eye of Heaven's path noticed him? It felt weird. The old turtle said, "Don't panic. There must be a condition for the big eye to be triggered. You cleaned up so many puppets with your strength of half a venerable, but it didn't attack you. It's very likely that it won't attack anyone below the venerable level." Han Fei remembered that Run Tianfei, the old Be-Astra starred, also said that the less power you used, the less the Eye of Heaven's path would notice you. However, Han Fei had already stood up. Once the Eye of Heaven's path moved, he would immediately put Little Black and Little White away. He could also enter Forge the Universe for a while. However, after several minutes, the Eye of Heaven's path didn't move. Han Fei heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that this thing wouldn't attack anyone below the venerable level. 1 hour, 2 hours, after another 6 hours, Han Fei saw a light flickering on Little Black and Little White, and information appeared in his eyes again. Name, Twin Yin-Yang Spirit Swallowing Fish. Introduction. This is a descendant of the mysterious ancient Yin-Yang sky-swallowing fish. The black and white fish are born together. The white fish is docile, and the black fish is brutal. They are symbiotic. As long as one of them survives, the other won't die. Level 70, quality, mysterious, storage of chaotic aura, 1 strand, food, everything can be swallowed, combat skills, supreme yin-yang wheel, spirit swallowing body, fusion, Gemini divine technique, soul power fusion, 1 hour, remarks, the black fish is invisible. Except for the master, only the yin-yang divine eyes born by heaven and earth can see through it. After fusion, its combat power will be greatly increased, and it will be comparable to a divine weapon. Han Fei had already guessed that Little Black and Little White were making a breakthrough. Although Han Fei felt it was quite amazing that they didn't go through a tribulation. However, Little Black and Little White were mysterious creatures, and they had the connate Taoist figure. It seemed reasonable for this to happen to them. However, when Han Fei saw that the storage of spiritual energy turned into the storage of chaotic aura, he immediately felt shocked. For a long time, Han Fei had no way to obtain chaotic aura. He didn't even know what chaotic aura was. However, now Little Black and Little White actually produced chaotic aura 1 step ahead of him, except that the storage of spiritual energy turned into chaotic aura. After this breakthrough, the soul power numbers of Little Black and Little White also disappeared and were replaced by the exact fusion time. The soul power represented the length of time the master had fused with his spiritual beast. In the past, when Han Fei fused with Little Black and Little White, this time was calculated. Less than 2 hours had passed. Once this critical value was exceeded, Han Fei would feel that his spirit would become weak. The Gemini divine technique was a kind of wonderful technique that could even make his body disappear, so it didn't count. But if it was just a simple fusion, it used to take up to 1 hour at most, but now it had doubled. This was too touching for Han Fei. First update. Asking for votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 1478. The advancement of Little Black and Little White was completely beyond Han Fei's expectation. On this trip to the Thousand-Star City, Han Fei never thought that he would have this extra gain. Back then, when he was deducing the soul-searching technique, the subsequent deductions required chaotic chi. However, at that time, he didn't know what chaotic chi was. However, there was no need to ask about it in advance. It was just like the realm. When one reached it, one would naturally be able to experience it. It was something that would happen naturally. If his realm wasn't high enough, it would be a bit boring to force it out. This time, although the information of Little Black and Little White's advancement had changed, there were no new abilities, which made Han Fei feel quite regretful. However, Han Fei thought about it. If they could give birth to a new ability every time they advanced, wouldn't it be too amazing? This time, being able to breed chaotic chi had already greatly exceeded his expectations. At least, if he needed chaotic chi in the future, he wouldn't have to worry about it. However, at this moment, Han Fei probably didn't have time to study the chaotic qi. During the advancement of Little Black and Little White, the surrounding spiritual energy were still surging towards Han Fei's body spontaneously. Originally, Han Fei thought that after his body absorbed enough, it would stop absorbing. But not so. In the immortal palace, the spiritual energy was violent. In addition to spiritual energy, there was also an inexplicable energy. This energy was spreading slightly into his body. Besides, Han Fei felt that this energy seemed to be making him manic. Heavenly enlightenment. Bam! With a heavenly enlightenment, Han Fei felt the explosive power all over his body and hurriedly said, "Old Yuan, did I swallow chaotic qi by mistake?" In Han Fei's opinion, ordinary spiritual energy wouldn't make his body explode. Otherwise, there could only be another kind of unknown energy here. He had been fighting for the past 3 days, and spiritual energy erupted crazily, so Han Fei hadn't noticed it. Now that the battle was over, the problem immediately arose. When he was in the Waterwood Immortal Palace, he had never encountered this situation. Or maybe it was because his time in the Waterwood Immortal Palace was very short. After all, it was someone else's territory, not his own. The old turtle said, "No, chaotic energy isn't something that can be casually absorbed. What you absorbed was most likely the corrosive power of that large eyeball. Those mutated puppets might have been corroded by this power. This, F***. Why didn't you say so earlier?" The old turtle said unhurriedly, "There's no hurry. This kind of power also needed a long time to infuse. It won't be effective for a while." Han Fei didn't know what to say. Of course it's big. He had never thought of absorbing this power. However, even if he didn't want to absorb them, they were still drilling into his body. Fortunately, his heavenly awakening divine art had dispersed this power. Otherwise, he would feel extremely bloated. The Heaven's Path Arcane didn't seem like a good thing at all. Although it was not attacking him, Han Fei did not want to be under its gaze for too long. After all the puppets were killed and thrown into Forge the Universe, except for the Eye of the Heavenly Law, the Yin-Yang Fairy Palace was still shrouded in violent spiritual energy and chaotic fire energy. However, they posed no threat. Han Fei naturally had plenty of time to find the entrance to the palace. Han Fei felt that the entrance should be covered by an array. Therefore, he could try every single area of the palace. Of course, such a stupid method was just Han Fei's guess. What if the location of the entrance could be changed? Then it would be useless even if he tried them one by one. Indeed, Han Fei was helpless. After searching for so long, he didn't find any trace at all. So, after trying again for several hours, Han Fei still couldn't find the entrance to the palace. This restriction was not open to him. Therefore, Han Fei had to look at other places above this fairy palace. Because perception was useless, Han Fei could only search slowly. Perhaps the previous battle was too violent, or maybe the battle here was very crazy, causing the surface of the floating island to be in a mess. Han Fei estimated that if it weren't for the fact that this floating island had been nourished by the essence of heaven and earth and had an extremely hard texture, it would have been destroyed by an ancient battle. Otherwise, they would have long since been scattered by a great battle in ancient times. Looking around, it looked like it had been gnawed by dogs. Han Fei cleaned up everywhere, piling up the gravel and mud again. Even these seemingly worthless things, Han Fei found that he couldn't put them into Forge the Universe. Han Fei grabbed a handful of mud, felt it, and found that this mud also contained a lot of spiritual energy. While Han Fei sighed, "Is this still mud?" It's no exaggeration to call an elixir. This mouthful of mud is probably as good as an ordinary spiritual fruit. It took Han Fei a full 2 days to clean about 1/3 of the surface of the floating island in the Yin-Yang heaven like a robot. At this moment, Han Fei was standing in front of a weird hole. Rather than calling it a cave, it would be better to call it a huge square. After all, this hole was too big. Han Fei walked around many times before he realized that this was a huge hole, which seemed to have been smashed by something. This big hole had existed for a long time, and there seemed to be another world inside. Now, it blocked Han Fei's vision. Or rather, Han Fei felt that what he saw was just an illusion. It seems that I still have to go in and have a look. Han Fei felt that if he went in through this hole, he would find something if nothing went wrong. As for what was inside, where could this big hole go? Han Fei didn't know. Maybe this should be his destination. After all, he had been searching for so many days, but he didn't find anything. Standing at the entrance of the hole, Han Fei subconsciously pinched his fingers, having a bad feeling. The old turtle said, "Since you're here and you've already faced the eye of the heavenly law, you have to go." Han Fei said lightly, "I'm thinking about a question." The old turtle asked, "What?" Han Fei looked up at the eye of the heavenly law. "Do you think it's transformed by the Great Way, or is it controlled by someone behind it?" The old turtle froze for a moment and sneered. "Nonsense, of course it is transformed by the Great Way. This Yin Fairy Palace violated the rules of the Great Way and created a big problem for heaven and earth. The rules of the Great Way have to pay attention to it, right? If it's controlled by someone, what's the purpose of them staying here? After all, is the time of a strong master not time? If it's a higher-level master, how can they have the time to keep staring at this place?" Han Fei said again, "If it is transformed by the Great Way, then what is the Great Way? Is it a person?" The old turtle scoffed. "What's wrong with you? If you want to fight, you have to go down. Otherwise, why don't you go and kill this big eyeball? If you kill it, no one will look at you." The corners of Han Fei's mouth twitched. He had a feeling that things were not so simple. However, this was the only way. When Han Fei stepped into this seal, he felt as if he had entered the Grand Supreme Elder's 8 trigrams pill furnace again. The surrounding temperature was simply too high. This F*King temperature was probably more than double that of the outside. He felt that his skin was slightly unable to resist it. However, this was not a big deal. Han Fei looked around as if he was in a barrier. This barrier was composed of gray matter, and he couldn't see the outside. Han Fei casually punched out, and the invincible fist mark was branded on the barrier. As a result, the power of the fist mark was directly absorbed by the gray seal. After all, this was where the king was. Although it was his mother's territory, the danger was not low at all. Han Fei didn't intend to let Little Black absorb these flames. This space seemed to be too large, and the power of the fire element was too fierce. Even if Little Black kept absorbing it, it shouldn't be able to absorb it in a day or two. It was not that Han Fei felt it was a waste of time, but Han Fei felt that he should strike while the iron was hot. If the remaining half-drop of origin water was not in the palace, it might be below here. He couldn't enter that palace at all. If the half-drop of origin water was placed here, why didn't he swallow it first? After he became a venerable, his strength would be greatly increased. Even if he encountered trouble, it would be easy to deal with it, right? Han Fei quickly dove for more than 50 kilometers. When there was only fire element left around him, he said helplessly, "Sure enough, this is a secret realm space, an independent small world. If it were still on the floating island, I'm afraid the floating island would be penetrated." The old turtle said, "The heavenly secrets here are chaotic. The heavenly path magic eye outside shouldn't be able to see in." Han Fei asked in surprise, "Really? It's only more than 50 kilometers. It can see the entire Yin sky, but it can't see here?" The old turtle said, "The heavenly secrets are chaotic, which means that this space is a chaotic place. That thing just looks like an eye, but it's not a real eye. It doesn't care if you fight under its nose. It's a kind of surveillance of the heavenly path. How can it observe the chaotic heavenly secrets?" "Shoot!" Han Fei was chatting with the old turtle when a huge dragon head suddenly appeared in front of him. More importantly, the dragon head was still staring at him, which made Han Fei shiver. Han Fei made a fist mark, and at least 1/3 of the energy in his body was gathered in this punch. In addition to being startled by the sudden appearance of this dragon head, Han Fei immediately recognized that this should be the skeleton that the Azure Dragon Phantom was looking for in the Ideal Palace. Seeing the skeleton, Han Fei was not surprised. It was not unreasonable for the soul of the Azure Dragon to appear in the Ideal Palace. Although he couldn't tell the relationship between this Azure Dragon and the enemy, At least on the island of the waterwood sky, the human race and the dragon race seemed to be standing on opposite sides. Therefore, the soul of the azure dragon appearing in the ideal palace could only be captured by the old turtle. Then, they reached some kind of agreement. Otherwise, the soul of the azure dragon couldn't have the golden page. Now it seemed that the golden page was also a test for him. Wasn't this secret realm the same? Since the azure dragon's divine soul was detained, what about the corpse? Without the support of the soul, what was the use of this skeleton? Although they hadn't entered the real battle yet, Han Fei's guess was right. This was indeed the skeleton of a dragon head. The azure dragon's head was not facing him, but drooped on the other side. Phew! Han Fei patted his chest. Humph, there's no soul. It's just a skeleton. The old turtle asked, "Are you going to return it to the dragon?" Han Fei immediately sneered. Return it? Why would I return the dragon corpse that I got? Anyway, I've got the golden page. The old turtle looked as if he had expected this. He knew that Han Fei wouldn't return it. Now, he was probably already thinking about how to make use of this dragon corpse. Han Fei quickly jumped over. This dragon corpse was coiled into a circle with its head and tail connected. In the center of this circle, there was a small glass bottle floating, and Han Fei could even see the liquid in the bottle. Origin water. Han Fei's eyes lit up, and the big void hand had already reached out to grab the small bottle. However, the 10,000 Zhang dragon corpse shuddered. At the moment when Han Fei grabbed the origin water, it suddenly came to life and whipped at Han Fei with its tail. Han Fei's face changed drastically, and he was about to twist the void. However, he found that the space he was in was actually imprisoned. Sacrificing punch. Rumble. Han Fei was whipped thousands of meters away by the tail. At this moment, Han Fei loosened his arms, making a cracking sound. Han Fei gritted his teeth. Even the dead one is so strong. I think too highly of me. Did I get a dragon corpse to guard the origin water? Damn it. Second update. Please vote. End of this chapter. Chapter 1479. But at the moment when the ancient dragon corpse woke up, Han Fei felt as if thousands of iron-headed fish were galloping in his heart. Just from its big head, he knew it was not easy to defeat it. Han Fei didn't know what his mother was thinking. Didn't she think of lowering the difficulty a little? After all, it was already extremely difficult to reach the divine palace. At this time, the old turtle said, "This dragon corpse has been refined for tens of thousands of years. Its physical strength is not necessarily weaker than yours." After hearing this, Han Fei's heart sank. From the power of that blow, just now, he had already felt that the strength of this ancient dragon was very strong. Its body was only so big, and a casual shake of its tail was not something that ordinary people could withstand. Besides, the ancient azure dragon corpse was clearly being used as a spirit formation guardian. It was probably to prevent someone from stealing the source water. But since the ancient dragon corpse was used as a guard, its strength obviously couldn't exceed the king realm. Besides, when I left this dragon corpse, I should have considered my combat ability. If I left the half-king realm, I would be almost invincible under the king realm. Han Fei thought that it might be possible. If he defeated a half-king realm, wouldn't he be able to prove that he had the potential to become a king? However, if it was so difficult to get this half-drop of source water, then when he got the half-drop in the sea-quelling painting, his mother should have told him. Even if she didn't say it at that time, she could have said it when he was in the sky meditation garden. Han Fei took a deep breath and guessed in his heart, maybe this ancient dragon corpse is not as powerful as I thought. With a thought in Han Fei's mind, the infinity water turned into thousands of knife lights and swept across. Clang, clang, clang. After a little experiment, Han Fei found that the infinity water had no effect on this ancient dragon corpse. From this, it could be seen that the toughness of his physique had already reached an unimaginable level. Huh! The dragon roared, the void shook, and the sound waves rushed straight into Han Fei's mind. Divine stab. Han Fei waved his hand, and the embroidery needle appeared in his hand. He gathered his spiritual power on it and opened the heavenly gate with his spear. The divine stab burst out. BM, the dragon swung its tail, causing the void to explode. Surging ripples spread out in all directions. In an instant, his divine soul attack disappeared without a trace, like a stone sinking into the ocean. The power he exerted was obviously weaker than the ancient Azure Dragon corpse. Fighting against a creature with a physique comparable to his own, and a creature of the dragon race at that, the difficulty of the battle was not low. And this was only the ancient Azure Dragon corpse. If it had a divine soul, who knew how much power it could unleash? In just a few seconds, after 2 tests, Han Fei confirmed some information. His physique is not stronger than mine, but his strength is definitely greater than mine. His strength was between a high-grade Venerable 1 and a top-grade Venerable 1, and he fought based on his instincts and willpower. The ancient Azure Dragon corpse's only belief is to protect this half-drop of origin water. The corners of Han Fei's mouth curled up slightly. If that's all, it's just a bluff. Sure enough, if there is no accident, this ancient Azure Dragon corpse is either threatened by me or has reached an agreement with me. According to Han Fei's current preliminary estimation, even if this Azure Dragon was alive, it was at most a half-king realm. Maybe it was relatively strong among the half-king realms, but it should still be a step away from the sea expansion realm. Han Fei twisted the space and tried to appear directly next to the origin water with the star teleportation technique. However, when he was less than 100 meters away from the origin water, with a bang, Han Fei was bounced away. A golden spherical restriction directly blocked Han Fei's way. Even the revolving star transposition technique was sealed within that area. The dragon roared and Han Fei's head hurt. He could only resist it with the soul driving array and dodged again. It seemed to be irritated by Han Fei's sudden crossing of the boundary, so the dragon corpse took the initiative to attack. Its huge body began to shrink at an extremely fast speed. Crack, crack, crack. As the Azure Dragon corpse shrank, thousands of dragon scales fell off its body at once. Swish, 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 the scales fluttered and intertwined into a net. Han Fei didn't take it seriously. After all, this power was only at the advanced Venerable realm at most. Han Fei's body dodged like a phantom. Even if the dragon scales fell on his body, they only made clanking sounds. This was the same as when Han Fei swept the Azure Dragon corpse with the infinity water. Neither of them could hurt the other. Swish, Han Fei's figure disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already on the back of the Azure Dragon corpse. Because he didn't feel any soul power surging in this dragon corpse, Han Fei believed that the only power this guy could use to attack the soul was the dragon roar. The power of his divine soul was not weak. Therefore, although the dragon roar was a little threatening to him, it was not very strong. Although Ren Tianfei said that his soul power was not very high and there was still a lot of room for growth. But that was only relative to the old monster that was tens of thousands of years old. If the true body of the Azure Dragon was here, Han Fei definitely wouldn't stand on its back so casually. However, this was just a corpse after all. Han Fei looked around and said to the old turtle, "Old Yuan, help me take a look at this dragon corpse. What's different about it? There must be something that can break the seal." The old turtle said, "Are you so sure? The way to break the seal is on this dragon corpse?" Han Fei smiled and said, "It can only be on it. If the Guardian doesn't hold the key, then what's the point of the Guardian's existence? Things had to be given to others after all. The Guardian can't hunt everyone who comes." The old turtle pondered for a moment. "Have you forgotten that dragons have dragon balls?" Han Fei let the infinity water around him collide with the dragon scales. With a space distortion, he appeared in front of the dragon mouth. The stinky wind of the dragon roar instantly sprayed Han Fei's face. However, on the surface of Han Fei's body, layers of soul-driving arrays appeared one after another. While the dragon roared, Han Fei drilled directly into the dragon's mouth. At that moment, the void lines turned into more than 300, gushing out and drilling into the Azure Dragon corpse. And Han Fei raised his hands and directly opened the dragon mouth that was about to close. Those sharp teeth were even harder and sharper than dragon scales. Han Fei grabbed the 2 dragon teeth with both hands and thought to himself, "Fortunately, this dragon has become a little dragon. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to hold a tooth even if he hugged it." Even so, Han Fei's hands were dripping with blood. Out of instinct, the dragon mouth opened and closed. Han Fei's fist mark bombarded the dragon's mouth. The void lines had already drilled into the dragon's body. When Han Fei found a bead flashing with red light, he was slightly relieved. For a moment, all the void lines buckled. It should be noted that the void lines could not only control souls, but they could also be used for fishing. After all, it was also a kind of fishing line. When Han Fei buckled the Dragon Ball, the Azure Dragon seemed to be furious, and its body immediately grew larger. But Han Fei sneered, and the embroidery needle appeared in his hand. Grow, grow, grow. The Azure Dragon without a soul was just a sea snake. Except that its physique might have reached the half-king level. It couldn't do anything else. Of course, it would not be a problem for the ancient Azure Dragon corpse to guard a treasure. At least, if a junior or intermediate venerable came, he would probably be ruthlessly crushed. With the absolute advantage of his physical body, there was no need to reason at all. Huff! Han Fei stretched out his hand, buckled the Dragon Ball brought by the void lines, grabbed the embroidery needle, and with a twirl, he had already appeared outside the seal. When the seal lit up, Han Fei pushed the Dragon Ball forward, and his whole body, with a puff, got into the seal. Han Fei was a little surprised. "Old Yuan, how do you know? The key will be the Dragon Ball?" The old turtle said disdainfully. "Isn't this obvious? In this whole dragon, in addition to his body, the only thing that can be immortal is the Dragon Ball. This place is only so big. I just need to guess blindly." Han Fei smiled slightly. "But this Dragon Ball is smooth and dim. It seems that it has been covered with dust. You want to cultivate your strength again? I'm afraid it won't be easy." While talking, Han Fei had already walked to the side of the half-drop of origin water. The ancient Azure Dragon corpse was motionless at this moment. He didn't know whether it was stunned by the beating or after the Dragon Ball was taken. At this moment, the ancient Azure Dragon corpse was lying on the ground like a salted fish. It didn't look like it had been alive at all. After looking around and making sure that there was no mother soul mark, Han Fei reached out and grabbed the small bottle. This process was surprisingly smooth. The bottle was still a little cold, which didn't match the environment here. Huff! Han Fei grinned. Last time, half a drop of origin water sent him to the limit of a hidden fisher, and his soul power was sent to the level of a law enforcer. That was the stage where he grew the fastest. However, at that time, he was still very weak. It was only natural that the origin water was so effective. Who knew what kind of effect the remaining half a drop of origin water could achieve? Gulp! With the previous experience, Han Fei directly swallowed the origin water. Before, Han Fei clearly knew that he should have reached the limit of the explorer realm. He had even cultivated the indestructible golden body, but he still wanted to become stronger. He could only continue to integrate his soul into the golden body, cast an immortal soul, and continue to cultivate the indestructible tyrant body. Han Fei had never dared to cultivate this great technique. The main reason was that the battle on the Scattered Stars Island was imminent, and he couldn't waste his soul power. Once his soul was integrated into the golden body, he wouldn't have any ownerless souls to replenish it. Even if he could replenish it, the ownerless souls couldn't be completely absorbed by him at once. If he cultivated it, it would inevitably lead to a great reduction in his soul power. When he divided half of his soul for his avatar, Han Fei had already experienced the disadvantages of a great reduction in his soul power. His overall strength would be reduced by more than 30%, and his soul power would also be much weaker. If he encountered an ordinary opponent, it would be fine. However, if he encountered a strong opponent, it would be extremely dangerous for him to be weakened even a little bit. At this moment, the moment he swallowed the origin water, Han Fei activated the cultivation of the indestructible tyrant body. What Han Fei was going to cultivate was immortal soul. Third, end of this chapter. Chapter 1480. Unlike last time, this time, after taking the origin water, Han Fei's soul power had been greatly improved. However, Han Fei didn't know how much this improvement was for the time being. Now, Han Fei was going to practice the immortal soul. This was a very important moment. Han Fei knew very well that this was the only way for him to continue to improve himself in the explorer realm. As soon as this technique was used, Han Fei felt a splitting headache, which was different from the pain he felt when he was tempering his body. The cultivation method of the immortal soul was to crush a large amount of soul power and infiltrate it into the golden body. With the power of the invincible golden body, it was nourished and intertwined. To put it simply, Han Fei attached a layer of soul power to every corner of his golden body with the power of his soul. This part of power would gradually integrate with the golden body. After that, it could never be taken back. And this was just the beginning. After that, the soul power would be integrated into the flesh, blood, and skin. Of course, these were all in the future. This kind of soul consumption was no easier than splitting half of the soul and giving it to an incarnation. Han Fei even felt that the final consequences might be a little more serious. It was foreseeable that if Han Fei directly chose to become a venerable, then with the help of the origin water, his strength would only become extremely strong after becoming a venerable. However, if he used the power of the origin water in the explorer realm first, then, after becoming a venerable, his realm might not necessarily be able to improve quickly. In terms of strength, he might be relatively weak. Of course, all this was Han Fei's own guess. The specific improvement would only be known after he cultivated. Han Fei felt that his soul was being quickly drawn away, and the part of the power that was drawn away seemed to be sealed in the golden body skeleton. When his soul was absorbed into the golden body, Han Fei felt that his control over his body seemed to be changing. His soul was constantly being consumed. In the origin water, there was also a large amount of soul power filling Han Fei's soul sea. This made Han Fei let out a long sigh of relief. Sure enough, just as he had expected, this half a drop of origin water contained an extraordinarily high amount of spiritual energy. After all, the stage of obtaining the origin water was different, so its effect will be different. Now, the power of the divine soul was no longer a problem. However, another problem arose. Han Fei felt that his body was beginning to swell. Han Fei cultivated the immortal soul, but it had nothing to do with the physical body. Originally, the origin water not only enhanced the strength of the soul, it also had a great effect on improving the physical body. Han Fei's indestructible golden body was already very strong. It could even be said that Han Fei's golden blood and skin were beyond the scope of a normal human being. The power that Han Fei's every drop of blood and every cell could absorb was beyond the imagination of ordinary people. But now, with the infusion of the source water, the energy reserves in Han Fei's body were reaching saturation. Even though he had the indestructible golden body, he still couldn't withstand such a huge energy impact. The old turtle exclaimed, "This drop of water actually contains so much energy? It was even richer than the essence blood of a king. This is comparable to the essence blood of an emperor, right?" Han Fei had no time to talk nonsense with the old turtle. He had just started cultivating the undying tyrant body. If the energy could not be released, then he could only choose to break through to the supremacy stage after his body expanded to a certain extent. After 100 minutes, Han Fei's body expanded about twice as much. After that, it still maintained this growth rate. Finally, after Han Fei's body expanded to 6 times, he couldn't bear it anymore. His whole person began to gradually fall into a state of confusion, and the bottleneck of the supremacy stage had also begun to loosen, seeming to prompt Han Fei to break through. Because he started cultivating the undying tyrant body, Han Fei didn't feel that his soul power had increased at all. This was easy to understand. After all, these souls had gone to nourish his body. This was the first time that Han Fei had cultivated the immortal soul. If there was no source water, his soul would have been completely absorbed. There must be a return. Otherwise, with Han Fei's personality, he wouldn't have wasted so much soul power. After another 100 minutes, Han Fei was like a balloon, feeling that his body was about to explode at any time. The old turtle wasn't worried at first. However, it turned out that Han Fei's swollen body was simply outrageous. Before, this guy had been suppressing it and desperately refused to break through. Now, at the last moment, he was still suppressing it. This was playing with their lives. The old turtle roared in panic. Hey, hey, hey! Han Fei, boy, are you crazy? If you go on like this, you'll blow yourself up. Do you really think you're invincible? Stop! Stop! However, Han Fei didn't listen to him at all. Han Fei heard the old turtle's words, but he really wanted to tell the old turtle, "You haven't walked the invincible road at all, nor have you had the undying golden body at this time. So, you can't understand how I feel at all. Although I look like I'm about to explode to death, but I can still bear it myself. At least, there's still some space for me. I can't take it anymore." After a moment, sizzle, 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 suddenly, Han Fei found that the golden bones all over his body seemed to be smoking. The bright golden color was fading slightly. It seemed to be wrapped in a layer of faint blue that was so shallow that it was barely visible. The moment this faint blue color appeared, the terrifying energy in Han Fei's body seemed to have found a vent and rushed madly towards Han Fei's golden bones. It was like a dry land that needed rain to moisten it. Han Fei's body began to shrink. 6 times, 5 times, 4 times. When Han Fei's body shrank to twice the normal size, a cracking sound suddenly appeared in Han Fei's mind. At that moment, Han Fei was shocked. Han Fei felt that his barrier to the venerable realm was beginning to show signs of breaking. The old turtle was dumbfounded. The demi-venerable realm can no longer accommodate the strength of your body and soul. You actually took the initiative to open the barrier to the venerable realm? At this moment, Han Fei felt that the power of the source water might have been consumed by more than half, and the explorer realm had come to an end. At the last moment of the demi-venerable realm, Han Fei glanced at the data, and information appeared in his eyes. Owner Han Fei, level greater than 79, demi-venerable. Spiritual energy 420,000/420,000. Chaotic energy, untransformed spiritual power 49098/79999. Damaged. Perception range greater than 10,000 kilometers. Power greater than 2,498 waves. First spiritual heritage unknown. Second spiritual heritage unawakened. First spiritual beast twin yin-yang spirit swallowing fish level 70. Second spiritual beast unawakened. Main art sky stealing technique. Level 6 of void fishing. Venerable level divine quality. At that moment, Han Fei grinned. Sure enough, there was no such thing as the limit. As long as he could continue to go on, he could still go on. But at this time, Han Fei's body, from his spiritual heritage to his physical body, and then to his soul power, could only accommodate this much in the demi-venerable realm. Any more, and he might explode. Han Fei also knew that he had nowhere to go after reaching this point. Han Fei didn't care about the improvement of his spiritual energy. His spiritual power didn't increase, but decreased. Even if he had the source water, he couldn't make up for it. However, ideally, even if there was a gap, the gap was not very big. At this time, his perception didn't change. In terms of strength, it had increased by nearly 600 waves. Seeing this number, Han Fei was surprised at first, and then he grinned. He used to be envious of the power of one wave. But now, it had increased by 600 waves at once. What did this mean? Now he could kill a few explorers with a casual wave of his hand. At this time, there was no time for Han Fei to practice the God-scaring painting. Otherwise, if he wouldn't have visualized this painting, maybe his soul power could be replenished. The next step, which was more critical, was to become a venerable. At the moment the bottleneck was broken, the energy in Han Fei's body was already being consumed crazily. Originally, the power provided by the source water was beyond his capacity. Now, the power provided by the source water suddenly began to be insufficient. Han Fei's body, which was twice the size of his original size, was shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye like a deflated balloon. In less than 100 seconds, Han Fei had returned to his normal size. Although the remaining energy supply of the source water was very powerful, it was still not enough to support Han Fei's rapid breakthrough. Even Han Fei himself was a little surprised. It seemed that after his breakthrough to the demi-venerable realm, his energy consumption was even greater. Buzz, at this moment, Han Fei issued an order in his heart, and more than 500 energy fruits flew out of Forge the Universe. Bam! 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 The energy fruits exploded one after another. Pure power, under Han Fei's swallowing technique, poured into his body crazily. At that moment, Han Fei felt that the world seemed to have become different. His eyes seemed to be plated with a layer of mysterious power. With a casual glance, he could penetrate the void of thousands of kilometers or even tens of thousands of kilometers. The surrounding space in front of him was not as mysterious as it used to be. Han Fei suddenly felt that there seemed to be a universe in the invisible dust. Han Fei saw a bit of mist infinitely enlarging in front of his eyes. He could feel every drop of blood and every wisp of soul in his body. This was a mysterious feeling. When he was an explorer, Han Fei had already felt the power of blood rebirth. It was just that it was not very clear at that time. But now, Han Fei seemed to understand it all at once. It seemed that his vitality was everywhere. What broken limb rebirth? What blood rebirth? That was simply his body's instinct. In addition, Han Fei could even see inexplicable particles floating between heaven and earth that were countless times smaller than spiritual energy. They seemed to be a kind of energy. They were shuttling wantonly. Although there were not many of them, they did not fill the whole world like spiritual energy. But they just existed like that. Smaller than spiritual energy particles, but more flexible than spiritual energy particles. In a trance, Han Fei understood something: chaotic qi. All of this was felt at the moment when Han Fei became a venerable. But what happened next made Han Fei confused again. In Han Fei's body, a black line appeared at some point. This black line appeared directly in Han Fei's heart. The blackness was spreading, quickly filling Han Fei's soul and sea of consciousness. At the moment they appeared, the old turtle was completely blocked. This kind of deepest secret of the body completely blocked the old turtle's perception in the darkness. Badump, badump, with every beat of Han Fei's heart, a strand of black silk began to intertwine in Han Fei's body. Slowly, all kinds of black silk threads densely covered Han Fei's body, from his mind to his flesh and blood, and even in some places, they completely overlapped with his spiritual heritage. At this moment, even Han Fei himself didn't know that he was undergoing an extremely strange mutation. Chapter 1481. There was no telling how long it had been, but Han Fei was still caught in an extremely weird change. In his body, a completely different spiritual vein seemed to have appeared. What Han Fei didn't know was that the power of this half-drop of origin water might have other uses. As a result, this power was forcibly used by him to find the limit of the explorer. Therefore, when this complete black spiritual vein appeared, the tens of thousands of spiritual fruits in Han Fei's body, including those ultra-quality spiritual fruits, all collapsed. They all turned into terrifying energy, providing power for the emergence of this black spiritual vein. This energy formed layers of thick cocoons inside and outside Han Fei's body. It seemed that the energy had been so much that it was overflowing and solidifying. However, the old turtle who was shielded, although he couldn't perceive it, the sense of despair made him feel to his horror that some extremely strange changes seemed to have taken place in Han Fei's body. There seemed to be waves surging outside him, and he himself, like the little turtle when it was young, couldn't control his body. The surging energy in the outside world was turbulent like a river tide. Even though the extent of this turbulence was slowly, at an invisible speed, it was decreasing. It seemed to have been swallowed by Han Fei. It might have been a few hours, or it might have been a day. In short, it shouldn't be more than a day. In Han Fei's Forge the Universe, this kind of pure energy was exhausted. However, the black spiritual vein was still growing. It was still asking for Kacha. Almost subconsciously, the seal that enveloped Han Fei suddenly broke. The fire element energy that filled this secret realm instantly enveloped Han Fei. And Han Fei's body, like a desert, was in urgent need of energy spring water. Han Fei subconsciously activated the swallowing technique. Boundless energy continued to rush over. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Han Fei seemed to have a long dream. In the dream, his thoughts were taken into another mysterious world. This reminded him of the scene when he was awakened for the first time. It seemed that he was sitting in the spirit awakening fluid again. In front of him, a thin film appeared again. The demon purification pot slowly rotated in his sea of consciousness. However, the number of vines on it had become 3. However, Han Fei didn't notice the changes in the demon purification pot. Like a dream, Han Fei's consciousness was placed in the thin film. There seemed to be many creatures on the other side of the thin surface. However, he was on this side of the fog, so it was difficult for him to see what was on the other side of the thin film. Han Fei was still puzzled. Do I have a spiritual beast? He didn't know if it was because he was in such an environment that his thoughts were slower, or what was going on. Han Fei's head was very confused. Han Fei only had one belief, which was that the creatures on the other side should come over quickly. Han Fei could see many shadows in the film. These shadows seemed to be trying to break through the membrane and reach his side. But all of a sudden, a strange shadow appeared. That shadow seemed to have claws or something else. Suddenly, he appeared in front of the thin membrane. Rip! Han Fei could also feel that the claws tore other creatures into pieces. At first, only one creature was torn to shreds. But in the blink of an eye, the opposite side seemed to have become a massacre, and many creatures were torn to shreds. Han Fei watched on the side and felt his blood freeze. He only felt that the spiritual beast on the opposite side was so ferocious. In just a moment, there was nothing on the opposite side except for the spiritual beast. It seemed that no spiritual beast dared to approach again. Puff! Suddenly, Han Fei saw that the thin film was suddenly pierced into a cone shape by a sharp thorn. It seemed that it would be pierced at any time. The creature on the opposite side seemed to be trying very hard to pierce this layer of thin film. Seeing this, out of curiosity, Han Fei slowly stretched out his finger, wondering if he could touch the creature on the opposite side. Pop! When Han Fei's finger just touched the sharp thing, the thin film suddenly broke. All he saw was a black claw reaching out. The claw had 3 claws in the front and 1 at the back, and each claw was as sharp as a steel knife and as sharp as a thin cone. The claws and legs were pitch black, but they looked extremely powerful and ferocious. Han Fei was stunned on the spot. He only saw the claws scratching up and down, left and right. After a few flashes of knife light, a hole was made in the thin film with difficulty. When the creature all crawled over, Han Fei was even more dumbfounded. Is this a crow? As soon as the pitch-black bird heard Han Fei call it a crow, it immediately pounced on him and poked him with its beak. However, after penetrating this thin film, it was no longer the original one. Therefore, at this moment, the strength of this little crow was almost negligible. When it poked Han Fei's body, flames flickered and clanked. Seeing that it couldn't poke Han Fei, the bird didn't poke anymore. It flapped its wings and let out an ah scream. At this moment, Han Fei's consciousness was slowly withdrawing from this space. However, in a daze, he seemed to hear a bird's cry, as if he had been stabbed. However, Han Fei, who was in a mess, didn't care why there was a bird's cry here. Unlike Han Fei, when this bird cry appeared, the sky above the entire 1,000-star city and the entire Inyang heaven was shrouded in black clouds. At the same time, there was a cry that resounded through the world. In the 1,000-star city, all the venerable realm powerhouses and explorers looked up at the void. In the sky, black clouds were shrouded, and there was ear-piercing bird cry that shook the world. This was really not a good sign. Someone murmured, 10 years ago, there was a strange sound. It chirped 3 times. Is it happening again? Someone was surprised. What is it this time? Someone pinched his fingers to calculate, but even though he was bleeding, he couldn't calculate anything. It seemed that everything about this bird cry had the ability to disrupt the heavenly secrets. On the Scattered Stars Island, Shweshenchi and the others all frowned. In the boundless sea, the sea was surging and the black clouds were rolling, which didn't look like a good thing. In the general's mansion, Shweshenchi said directly, "Tell everyone to be on guard. This is not a good sign." The star tortoise couldn't help but say, "Will there be a war? I'm just a temporary substitute. You know I'm not capable of fighting a war." Shweshenchi said with an ugly face, "Since he asked you to do this instead of me, do you think he's stupid? Or do you think I'm stupid?" After Shweshenchi left, the star tortoise sighed gloomily. "I've exposed too much. An excellent tortoise is indeed coveted." In the boundless sea, the black killer snail king was hiding somewhere near the wall of death with a venerable. At this moment, the black killer snail king said lightly, 10 years ago, there was a sound that shook the world. We can all hear it in the forbidden area. This time, the situation is similar. It seems that something is happening in the human world again. Someone said, "My king, the human race's internal strife is obvious. Those human venerables can't always stay on the Scattered Stars Island, can they?" The black killer snail king shook his head slightly. "My real body is not here. Now, even if there are twice or even 3 times more people, it's useless. Wait, in a level 3 fishery, in a small restaurant on a dragon boat, an elegant man and a man in a black robe were drinking tea. All of a sudden, the elegant man trembled all over, and the teacup in his hand instantly shattered and disappeared without a trace. Opposite the elegant man, the man in a black robe also trembled and asked tentatively, "The Emperor Sparrow?" The elegant man nodded slightly. "It seems that none of us expected this. I thought it was already a great fortune for him to have the twin yin-yang spirits swallowing fish. But now it seems that the appearance of the Emperor Sparrow is completely beyond my expectation." The man in a black robe cursed in a low voice, "Son of a B****, Han Guanshu, isn't your son too talented and lucky?" The Emperor Sparrow, "It doesn't belong in our corner at all, does it?" The elegant man was Han Fei's father. At this moment, he didn't look very happy. He said, "To be precise, it's not a creature that should have appeared in this era. Even the 36 mysterious heavens, which cover billions of kilometers of the sea, can hardly find it." The man in a black robe was the patriarch of the Thug clan, Li Daxian. He scolded, "You're so mysterious. I hate this bad habit of yours the most. If you want to show off, just show off. So what if your son is outstanding? Are you afraid that he will steal your limelight?" A teacup reappeared in Han Guanshu's hand. He picked up the teapot and poured himself another cup of tea. "You only know its name, but you don't know. In history, when the Emperor Sparrow is born, there will be a storm of blood. Among the thousands of races in the world, it is regarded as a symbol of disaster." The man in a black robe sneered, "I don't know what disaster is. All I know is that this son of yours is one of a kind." Hearing what the man in a black robe said, Han Guanshu couldn't help but grin. "That's true. So what if he is the Emperor Sparrow? He's my son after all." Han Fei's thoughts seemed to have gone through a long time, or maybe only a very short time. Obviously, he couldn't tell the difference anymore. He didn't know how long it had been, but when he felt hungry, he suddenly came back to himself. At this moment, Han Fei was shocked to find that all the available energy fruits in Forge the Universe and the various creatures he had worked hard to collect were consumed at the moment he became a venerable. The source water no longer provided any energy or soul power. At this moment, he had already become a venerable. If it weren't for the massive amount of spiritual energy in Forge the Universe that was still pouring into his body, Han Fei would have almost forgotten that he was breaking through to the venerable realm. Seeing that the surrounding seals had been broken, Han Fei knew that the fire element energy in this secret realm was providing for his cultivation, and the power of the source water seemed to have been exhausted. At this moment, he couldn't feel it all. At this moment, although he had become a venerable, the breakthrough hadn't ended yet. Han Fei sat cross-legged and continued to absorb the fire element energy. Fortunately, He had enough resources. If ordinary people became venerable, the resources he had would be enough for them to become venerable 5 or 6 times. The momentum around Han Fei was also rapidly growing. After a full hour, when Han Fei felt that it was difficult for the spiritual energy to promote his strength, he frowned and slowly opened his eyes. The effect of spiritual energy is so low. Chapter 1482. Han Fei seemed to have forgotten what he had done in a daze. In fact, when he swallowed the source water last time, he was in a coma for a long time. Han Fei estimated that the situation this time should be the same as the last time. When he was advancing to the venerable realm, Han Fei was so focused that he didn't even look at his own information. After all, the result was the same whether he looked at it earlier or later. In any case, he had already become a venerable. When he first heard of the venerable realm, he was still in the heavenly water village. At that time, the venerable realm was still an extremely mysterious realm for him. Han Fei felt that the use of spiritual energy had slowed down, and the fluctuations of his power were also very restrained. All of this showed that he'd already entered a completely new realm. In fact, Han Fei woke up now because the spiritual energy in his body, even the liquefied spiritual energy, was not enough to promote the improvement of his strength. For a long time, the human body lacked spiritual energy and would become hungry. This was common sense even for fishers. At this moment, Han Fei certainly felt it. However, at the venerable realm, the improvement of spiritual energy on the body was almost negligible. If there was a big use for it now, it must be the chaotic qi. However, this was exactly what Han Fei lacked now. At this time, Han Fei didn't stop cultivating, but tried to decompose the spiritual energy. After all, the 70% dismantling rate of the venerable realm was no joke. Of course, Han Fei was also very confident. After all, he was going to become a king. If he couldn't even achieve this, it would be a joke. At this moment, Han Fei's body seemed to be burning. He was using the scorching power in this small world to quickly and massively dismantle the spiritual energy. When the dismantling rate of the spiritual energy reached 50%, Han Fei found that in the spiritual energy, some slight power began to escape. This was not the power of the spiritual qi itself, but the power of the great path contained in the spiritual qi that was dissipating. When Han Fei's dismantling rate of the spiritual energy reached 72%, his cultivation efficiency doubled. However, Han Fei was still dissatisfied because the method of slowly improving his soul, strength, and physique through the dismantling rate of the spiritual energy was still too slow. Han Fei could tell that if he cultivated at full speed and had enough spiritual spring and energy tubes, his physical strength might be less than 1/10,000th of his current strength after a whole day's work. It could be said that he was far from it. In other words, he wanted to double his strength again through the method of spiritual energy. In that case, it would take at least 30 years. Hiss! Bang! Suddenly, the spiritual energy and energy vortexes around Han Fei were shattered by Han Fei. This speed was too slow. However, a twofold increase in strength was equivalent to a level 80 to a level 81 or level 82. It was even to the extent that I'm unable to attain the peak of the elementary exalt realm. Yet I actually need 30 years of time? Who the hell would be able to take it? Even if he accelerated it with Forge the Universe, it would still take 15 years. Suddenly, Han Fei thought of something. Right, could the time in Forge the Universe change as he became a venerable? Thinking about that, Han Fei closed his eyes and looked at the foggy space inside the demon purification pot. He glanced around and saw the number 2 of 128 in the void under the time chain. This meant that the time in Forge the Universe was twice as slow as that in the outside world. However, what really excited Han Fei was that behind the time chain of light, there was the word upgradable. Wow! Han Fei clicked on the word and immediately received a message. The message said that to upgrade the time chain, a wisp of chaotic qi was needed. When he saw this message, Han Fei was stunned. Damn, it wasn't easy for him to accumulate a huge amount of spiritual spring and spiritual fruits. However, once he became a venerable, he found that spiritual energy didn't work at all. Wasn't it a pain in the ass? However, could a wisp of chaotic chi upgrade the time chain of light? Han Fei certainly wouldn't miss such a good thing. Although Han Fei didn't know how precious chaotic chi was, it was nothing compared to the total amount of chaotic chi needed by the entire venerable realm. Once the effect of the time chain was increased, even from 2 times to 3 times, it would save him a lot of time. It was equivalent to reducing a task that would take 30 years to complete to 10 years. This sounded crazy enough. Besides, the current little white could also produce chaotic chi, and it could produce a wisp of chaotic chi at once. God was on his side. Han Fei was overjoyed and directly summoned Little Black and Little White. Han Fei immediately hugged Little White, kissed her hard, and said, "Daughter, swallow a wisp of chaotic chi for Daddy." Han Fei knew that this would probably scare the old turtle. However, there was nothing he could do. After all, he also needed chaotic chi. Even if he didn't let the old turtle know now, he would probably find out in the future. But to Han Fei's surprise, the old turtle surprisingly didn't ask anything. Han Fei was curious and couldn't help but ask, "Old Yuan, what are you doing? Did anything happen while I was in the venerable realm?" At that time, the old turtle really wanted to howl a few times, but he managed to hold himself back. He only heard him say, "Woo, you do your own thing first. I have something to think about." Han Fei was puzzled. Why did the old turtle change his temper? However, at this moment, he was only thinking about the time chain. How could he think so much? In Han Fei's sea of consciousness, the old turtle's body was trembling slightly. If Han Fei came over to take a look, he would know that the old turtle seemed to be very scared now. The old turtle's eyes flickered, and he muttered in his heart, "Is that the Emperor Sparrow? It's the Emperor Sparrow. Is my turtle life destined to be so rough?" The Emperor Sparrow. I just landed on a random person. How did that person awaken the Emperor Sparrow? This question seemed to have been bothering the old turtle for a long time. Now, he was sure of one thing. He couldn't run away for the time being. He couldn't help but think of Han Guanshu's proposal. Han Fei should be a person with great luck, right? Although dual-talented spiritual beasts were quite amazing, there were indeed such spiritual beasts in this world. However, the one who awakened the Emperor Sparrow's spiritual beast was really rare. The old turtle pondered, if it really doesn't work, should I establish a long-term friendship with Han Fei? At least, after following Han Fei for so many years, this kid was still a loyal and affectionate person. He was just a little bit cruel to the enemy. He was quite kind to his own people. At this time, Han Fei had already summoned Little Black and Little White. Little White seemed to have received some kind of inheritance. When Han Fei said that, he knew what this chaotic chi was. All of a sudden, White E's body lit up. Immediately afterward, Han Fei saw a strand of hair-like gray mist slowly spit out from Little White's mouth. It was only about 3 inches long. Seeing this scene, the old turtle was shocked. What the F***CK is this spiritual beast? What kind of strength did he have to be able to produce chaotic chi? If this thing grows up, how powerful will it be? However, the old turtle still didn't say anything. It was already wondering how to get along with Han Fei in the future. On the other side, Han Fei was already dumbfounded. Is this the chaotic chi? For a long time, Han Fei didn't think it was the source of spiritual energy. Although he had a lot of spiritual energy, he had worked hard to save it. However, now he actually obtained a wisp of chaotic chi so easily. For some reason, Han Fei felt that he wanted to swallow this thing very much. It seemed that this thing was very beneficial to his cultivation. In fact, Han Fei knew that this thing must be an extremely top-level energy. Even the old tortoise had only managed to accumulate a few strands after absorbing for so long. Yet Little White spat out a wisp of it so easily. "Daddy, I'm so tired, so hungry." Han Fei suddenly came back to himself, only to see that Little Black and Little White were circling each other. This was what they would do when they were about to hibernate. Han Fei's heart did a flip. This chaotic chi must not be simple. Even if Little White could do it, it was still not easy. Immediately, with a thought, a river appeared and forged the universe, which was full of spiritual spring water. Little Black and Little White directly went inside. In an instant, the two small fishes turned first and formed a yin-yang diagram. A huge amount of spiritual energy was drilling into their bodies. Although Han Fei still had something to ask Xiao Bai. Han Fei could feel that Little White and Little Black were so tired that they seemed to be paralyzed. Suppressing his desire for the chaotic qi, Han Fei thought of an idea and upgraded the chain of time. On the demon purification pot, a small vine suddenly stretched out. With a gentle scoop, under Han Fei's eager gaze, the wisp of chaotic qi was scooped away. Han Fei was quite guilty at that time. After a brand new energy came out, he hadn't even felt it yet, and he offered it to the demon purification pot. This made his heart itch. When Han Fei looked at the demon purification pot again, he found that the chain of time didn't change immediately, but the words upgrading appeared. After staring at it for dozens of seconds, Han Fei saw that there was no change in this message. Therefore, Han Fei very naturally and curiously diverted his attention to his new personal data. Owner Han Fei, level greater than 80, venerable, spiritual energy 420,000/420,000, convertible, chaotic chi, unconverted, spiritual power 55666/79999, damaged, perception range greater than 12,000 kilometers, power greater than 3,000 waves, first spiritual heritage, unknown. Second spiritual heritage, unknown, first spiritual beast, twin yin-yang spirit swallowing fish, level 70. Second spiritual beast, emperor sparrow, level 1. Main art, heaven stealing technique, level 6 of void fishing, venerable level. Divine quality. At first glance, Han Fei naturally looked at the overall situation. His gaze had just fallen on the word transformable behind the spirit chi. All of a sudden, he felt a jolt in his heart. He immediately looked down. Shoot! Emperor Sparrow? What the hell? When did I get a spiritual beast? Chapter 1483. At this moment, Han Fei was dumbfounded. Why did he suddenly get another spiritual beast? Usually, one could only obtain a spiritual beast when one's spirit was awakened, right? How did he get a spiritual beast after breaking through to the venerable realm? It had to be said that the experience of forgetting to acquire a gifted spiritual beast was something that countless people had experienced. It seemed that a person could have a gifted spiritual beast as long as they enchanted it. As for what he would gain, it all depended on fate. In fact, the forgetting went both ways. Perhaps it was because spiritual beasts could trust humans better after forgetting their memories. Han Fei felt that the name of this spiritual beast was so strange. Could it be a bird? Could it be that there was a fish called the Emperor Sparrow? After discovering such a major mistake, Han Fei summoned the Emperor Sparrow immediately. Whoosh! With a flash of black light, Han Fei saw a black crow the size of a palm in front of him. The crow was looking at him with its head tilted, looking rather arrogant and cold. It was clearly a crow, but it was like a goshawk holding its head high and chest out. Crow. Han Fei felt that he had seen this crow somewhere before. It was just that he did not have any impression of it. Han Fei saw this little thing barking wildly at him. That sound was as if he had been stabbed 3 times. You're the one who's being very fierce, so why are you acting like someone's bullying you? In Han Fei's eyes, information emerged. Name Emperor Sparrow. Introduction. This is a mysterious creature from ancient times, and it is considered inauspicious by all races. DK was born to be a monarch and looked down on both the past and present. The imperial sparrow was the strongest among all the ferocious beasts of the primitive age. Level, on quality. Primeval beast, stored spiritual energy, 10,000 points food, depends on your mood, battle skill, eye of disaster. Remarks follow the heart of the emperor. Otherwise, disasters will befall you. Remark 2. Rumor has it that anyone who kills the Empress Sparrow will die. Hiss. When Han Fei saw the message, he couldn't help but take a deep breath. What the hell did he create? You're only level 1, and you want to proclaim yourself an emperor? Why don't you go to heaven? If a real venerable sovereign saw you, he would definitely kill you. Also, this thing had to be done according to his wishes? Otherwise, would a calamity descend? Was there a mistake? I can pinch it to death with one finger. Looking at the Emperor Sparrow, who was looking at him with its head tilted, Han Fei heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, this thing was only level 1. What if he was at the same level as Little Black and Little White? He might not even be able to defeat him. Little Crow, what do you want to eat? Daddy will make it for you. The old turtle took a deep breath. Damn it, isn't this a death wish? Sure enough, the moment DK heard this, he let out an ah, as if he had been stabbed by a knife. The old turtle quickly shouted, Han Fei, do you want to die? This was an Emperor Sparrow. Don't ever provoke it. What is a crow? How could it compare to the Arch Sparrow? Quickly apologize. Han Fei. Han Fei was about to ask, how do you know the Emperor Sparrow too? However, all of a sudden, the secret realm where Han Fei was, the space changed and the fire element surged. Although Han Fei had subconsciously absorbed a tremendous amount of fire elements, it was difficult for Han Fei to quickly absorb all the fire elements in the entire treasure trove by himself. He didn't know if this secret realm was useless after the source water was swallowed. At this moment, the energy in the secret realm seemed to be crazily leaping out to the outside world. Crack! The sound of the seal breaking was heard. Immediately afterward, Han Fei saw a big eyeball suddenly appear in this secret realm. In that eyeball, blood-like magma was flowing, and it stared at Han Fei. The old turtle hurriedly shouted, "Be starred! Quickly take back the Emperor Sparrow. There are some things that I'll tell you slowly. Now, try not to provoke the eye of the heavenly path." Han Fei glanced at the little crow and took it back with a thought. What kind of look is that? I'm your master anyway. Can't you give me some face? Dong dong, dong dong. The eyeball of the eye of the heavenly path seemed to be expanding and contracting. This was something that Han Fei had never seen before. When he fought before, this thing didn't react at all. Now, it was nothing more than becoming a venerable. Was it really necessary? Did the Emperor Sparrow really activate the eye of the heavenly path? Was this big eyeball going to attack him? Wait. Suddenly, Han Fei seemed to hear an ethereal melody appearing in this secret realm. When this sound rang, Han Fei's mind was a little confused. He felt that something seemed to have appeared in the endless fire element. Han Fei, wake up! Love 999 Han Fei suddenly shivered and realized that he had encountered a formidable enemy. Han Fei looked around and saw some flaming figures wrapped in fire element. He didn't know when they had appeared around him. For some reason, Han Fei felt that these figures seemed a little familiar. When Han Fei saw a figure in the fire who was using a sword, he immediately gasped. Is this Sunmu? There were too many figures around. The old turtle shouted, "Heavenly demons! They're all heavenly demons! I told you not to mess with the Emperor Sparrow. Are you stupid?" Han Fei's face was black. "Old Yuan, watch your mouth. It's my spiritual beast, so I can do whatever I want with it. But tell me first, what are heavenly demons?" The old turtle said, "Heavenly demons are demonic shadows created by the great Tao of heaven from that person's memory world or the path of the great Tao when it punishes or wants to kill a person. These are just the most basic heavenly demons. Try your best to kill them first and see if there are any more." When it came to fighting, Han Fei suddenly became bolder. Just now, he saw his own information and whatnot. "Oh, my strength has increased by more than 1,000 times. How long has it been?" This level of improvement was simply terrifying. If there were no accidents, his pure strength could definitely kill those junior venerables that he had seen. Logically speaking, when he was a peak-level explorer, Han Fei knew that his strength was already comparable to that of a venerable. Judging from the description of Shuesh and Qi and the old turtle, if it was purely based on strength, a venerable who had just become a venerable would generally have no more than 1,500 waves. Later in battles, this was also proved. Even a junior peak-level venerable generally had no more than 2,000 waves. This was also the reason why Han Fei could kill a venerable when he was still an explorer. After all, he could defeat 10 people with great strength. Even if your realm was higher and your strength was not as good as mine, I could still kill you. However, the premise was that you had to have chance. At the venerable level, it was extremely difficult to use secret methods. It was almost impossible to find a secret technique that had no side effects. At least, there shouldn't be one in the yin-yang heaven. Even Han Fei's Beast King art had lost its effect after he became a demigod. Their improvement was extremely limited, and Han Fei's current power of nature had almost exceeded this limit. Therefore, secret methods were naturally of little use. Now, Han Fei had just become a venerable, but his strength had already reached 3,000 waves. Some ordinary heavenly talents, even if they were lucky enough to survive until they became a venerable and reached the peak level of a mid-level venerable, their strength was only about 3,000 waves. This meant that in the past, Han Fei needed to use the power of the Great Way to fight with a mid-level venerable. However, he couldn't kill them at all. After becoming a demigod, Han Fei had the confidence to compete with a mid-level venerable. Now, if he used the power of the Great Way, it would be easy for him to kill a mid-level venerable. Boom! Han Fei made a fist mark, and the fist light penetrated the fire element, crushed out a flaming python, and rushed straight at the eye of the heavenly path. This blow was not to blow up this big eyeball. It was just that Han Fei wanted to test how powerful the eye of the heavenly path was. Since Ren Tianfei, the thug patriarch, and old Han could come here several times, it meant that the eye of the heavenly path was not invincible. If he really couldn't do anything, he could use the power of the Great Way to force his way out of the Yin-Yang Palace. At the moment when Han Fei attacked, a large number of so-called extraterrestrial demons had already bombarded Han Fei. The old turtle said, "These are the most basic and ordinary extraterrestrial demons. They should have been created according to your realm. I estimate that they should have the strength of a beginner venerable. F***CK. So powerful. These were not the previous puppets. These were venerables. Previously, the Black Killer Snail King fought with its projection, which gave Han Fei a headache. But now, the Eye of the Heavenly Path was even more unreasonable and directly created extraterrestrial demons of the same realm. He couldn't even remember how many of the opponents he had killed and how much they hated him. Anyway, there were dozens of extraterrestrial demons at a glance. Damn it, it's not easy to defeat them. Bam, bam, bam. Fortunately, Han Fei's strength was much stronger than those in the same realm. Golden fist marks blasted out and smashed these so-called extraterrestrial demons into pieces with each punch. However, after the bodies of these extraterrestrial demons were shattered, they could be reassembled as if they had been reborn. This stumped Han Fei. No matter how weak these extraterrestrial demons were, they were still beginner venerables, not nobodies. Han Fei asked, "Old Yuan, is there any way to completely destroy these extraterrestrial demons?" The old turtle nodded. "I'm thinking that you don't have much chaotic energy now. You haven't even stabilized your realm yet. If you want to kill the extraterrestrial demons, why don't you hide in the small gourd world first? If you leave, they will naturally dissipate." Han Fei was speechless. "Damn, is this the answer you give me? I know the answer even if you don't tell me." Bam! At this moment, Han Fei's sacrificing punch blasted through the layers of fire elements and almost hit the big eyeball. In the end, the big eyeball shot out a red light, and his sacrificing punch was actually crushed in the light. Han Fei gritted his teeth. This is not a solution. Blindly attacking the extraterrestrial demons would not only fail to destroy them, but also waste his time and strength. It was not worthwhile. Gemini Divine Technique. Han Fei planned to use this technique to buy himself time to enter Forge the Universe. However, under the gaze of the Eye of the Heavenly Path, the Gemini Divine Technique didn't work at all. Helplessly, Han Fei could only fight while setting up arrays. Chapter 1484. Huff. Han Fei gasped for a while in Forge the Universe and sat down on the ground. Little Black and Little White returned to the spiritual spring and began to absorb the spiritual spring. He didn't know if it was because Little White had just spat out the chaotic chi, but the Gemini Divine Technique almost collapsed in less than 100 minutes. Han Fei took a breath and immediately asked, Old Yuan, what's going on? Did you see how the Emperor Sparrow came about? Han Fei was full of questions now. That thing doesn't look like a good bird. Just because I said a few words to it, it brought me a disaster? Damn it, who can stand it? The old turtle said leisurely, You have secrets that I couldn't see at the time. If you ask me, I've only seen the Emperor Sparrow after it was born. Isn't this your second spiritual beast? Han Fei's heart did a flip. Don't you think it's strange that I have a second spiritual beast? The old turtle shrugged. What's strange about that? In ancient times, some people cultivated their strength to the limit and tried their best to have a second spiritual beast. Among them, the simplest way is to create a reincarnation. Because of the infusion of the original body's power and bloodline, the reincarnation is very likely to awaken a powerful spiritual beast. When the old turtle said this, Han Fei immediately thought of Tengu. Tengu had awakened a legendary-level spiritual beast, the white dragon feather lobster. In a small place like the Heavenly Water Village, it was impossible. It wasn't until Tang Yen appeared that Han Fei discovered the mystery. Hearing the old turtle's words, Han Fei didn't ask any more questions. However, his situation was different from that of a reincarnation. He looked at his information. At this moment, his second spiritual heritage was displayed as unknown. But before this, the information on this side showed that he had not awakened. This meant that his second spiritual heritage had actually been awakened. It should have been awakened when he took the source water and fell asleep. Like the first spiritual heritage, it was also an unknown spiritual heritage. This showed that the level of the second spiritual heritage was also not ordinary. Considering the disappearance of all the energy fruits in Forge the Universe, it was not hard to imagine how much energy he swallowed while he was asleep. Even in the secret realm, when he woke up, he found that the fire elemental energy and the temperature of the flames in the secret realm had dropped significantly. Now that he thought about it, it should have something to do with the awakening of his second spiritual vein. Han Fei really wanted to feel his second spiritual heritage. However, the second spiritual vein seemed to have been hidden, and he actually did not discover it. There were still a lot of questions. Han Fei didn't dwell on the spiritual heritage, but asked, Old Yuan, do you know the Emperor Sparrow? What kind of species was this? Shouldn't human spiritual beasts all be marine creatures? Why would I awaken a bird? The old turtle sneered. There are thousands of races in the world, and any race can become a naturally endowed spiritual beast. What kind of logic was this? I don't know either. After all, spiritual beasts are unique to humans, which are different from our associated spirits. It wouldn't be surprising if you see someone become the companion spirit of a fish in the future. Han Fei rolled his eyes. Isn't that surprising? Tell me, what else is magical? The old turtle continued. As for the Emperor Sparrow, it only exists in legends. However, in my era, there was a story about the Emperor Sparrow. That's a true powerhouse, an existence that can stand up to the gods. Hiss! Han Fei's eyes widened. Is it so powerful? The old turtle snorted. Do you think that's it? The Emperor Sparrow has always existed only in legends. For example, in my era, it was said that the Emperor Sparrow was quite terrifying. It was said that the Emperor Sparrow led the primeval ferocious beasts and launched a 3,000-year expedition against the creatures known as the divine beasts of creation. Hiss! Han Fei asked quickly, what happened then? The old turtle said unhurriedly, that's all legends. I don't know much about it either. But later, the primeval ferocious beasts and the divine beasts of creation still exist in this world, but they are extremely rare and rarely appear. Han Fei was puzzled. Wait, Old Yuan, are the primeval ferocious beasts more powerful, or the divine beasts of creation? Also, how are these creatures ranked? What's the level of the ancient mutants? The old turtle thought to himself, since Han Fei has awakened the Emperor Sparrow, he must be extraordinary in the future. He'd better answer all the questions now. The old turtle said, actually, it's not complicated. There are differences in grades. Ordinary creatures, rare creatures, and exotic creatures are the most common creatures in this world. When they reach the legendary grade, it only means that this kind of creature is very powerful and has a lot of room for growth. And when they reach the legendary grade, they are already extremely rare. The legendary creatures and the ancient mutants are of similar quality. Most of them are descendants of the bloodlines of the ferocious beasts and the divine beasts. They have a lot of room for growth and are extremely rare for ordinary people. However, in this vast sea, there are actually many of them, but ordinary people can't meet them. So, people think that they only exist in legends. Then, the old turtle continued. After that, it's the primeval ferocious beasts and the divine beasts of creation. At this point, it's no longer about quality. These creatures are mostly divided according to the era. As for the mysterious ones, I don't know either. They are indeed very mysterious. Era? The old turtle nodded. Just like the Age of Doom you mentioned, it's different from your current era. The primeval era is also different from the primeval continent, and the primeval continent is still different from the chaotic world at the beginning of the world. In every era, there would be powerful beings appearing. You can't absolutely say that the creatures of this era are stronger than those of that era. You have to fight them to know that. After listening to the old turtle's introduction, Han Fei had a complete concept of the grades of these creatures. So, the Emperor Sparrow is the representative of the primeval ferocious beasts. After all, in his introduction, there was such a sentence. Among the tens of thousands of primeval ferocious beasts, the Emperor Sparrow is the best. In a word, the Emperor Sparrow's status was infinitely higher. Of course, the only thing that made Han Fei a little depressed was that this thing symbolized some kind of disaster. Didn't this mean that if he had the Emperor Sparrow in the future, he would become the enemy of the whole world if it was discovered? But now, Han Fei was not in the mood to care about this. What the old tortoise said today touched on too many secrets. Han Fei asked tentatively, "Old Yuan, which era do you belong to?" The old turtle was silent for a while and said unhurriedly, "I was born in the age of gods." Han Fei's eyelids twitched. "Well, if Astra's king no. Those creatures fought each other and seemed to be all killed in the end. The giant king once said that the gods fell. So it's about 130,000 years since the current era, right?" However, as soon as Han Fei said this number, the old turtle said, "The age of gods. This is a legendary era." It said that it took 60 million years from the rise of this era to the end. Pooh, Han Fei almost vomited blood. Damn it, what the hell is this? From the end of the gods to the end of the age of gods to the present, it's only been 130,000 years in total. Now you F** kings say that the age of gods has a history of 60 million years? Seeing that Han Fei was furious, the old turtle realized that he seemed to have said too much. So, the old turtle said slowly, This is just a rumor. Maybe I'm wrong. It's also possible that it has a history of 6 million years. However, Han Fei didn't believe the old turtle anymore. 60 million years and 6 million years. There was a difference of 10 times the amount of time. Also, even if the Age of Gods really only has a history of 6 million years, do you think it's a short time? Seeing that Han Fei was still surprised, the old turtle said, Hey, you're already a venerable. Why are you still making a fuss? The period I'm talking about is just collectively known as the Age of Gods in the long river of history. And during this period, I don't even know how many great changes have taken place. Han Fei said leisurely, Then Old Yuan, which period of the Age of Gods were you born in? Old Yuan said, I was born in the last 1,000,000 years, which can be regarded as the end of the Age of Gods. Han Fei secretly heaved a sigh of relief, fearing that this old guy would say, I lived through the entire Age of Gods. Then he had to find a way to kill this guy immediately. Han Fei asked, Then what about before the Age of Gods? Is it the ancient primeval times? Old Yuan chuckled. I haven't experienced it. How would I know? It's just that I heard there are a few more eras, but exactly which era corresponds to which era? Who knows? You can ask the god who crossed the Age of Gods. You'll definitely know. Han Fei was embarrassed and no longer mentioned this topic. Although this secret was quite deep, it was meaningless to him. 60 million years of history. His two lives combined were less than 100 years old. What was the point of studying the history of tens of millions of years? Han Fei glanced at the energy in Forge the Universe, which had been consumed. Outside, the Eye of Heavenly Path was watching. His strength hadn't been stabilized yet. At this moment, it was really a troubled time. At this time, Han Fei glanced at his information again. Immediately, he was attracted by the transformable option of spiritual energy. Spiritual energy can be transformable? What can it be transformed into? Seeing the word untransformed followed by the chaotic energy, Han Fei had some ideas in his heart. Could spiritual qi be converted into chaotic qi to exist? If so, would there be a limit to his chaotic energy? Chapter 1485. When Han Fei's strength reached the explorer realm, he increasingly felt that the effect of spiritual energy was a bit useless. In particular, the upper limit of spiritual energy that his body could hold was even more useless. In fact, the amount of spiritual energy that the human body could hold was always limited. Even a venerable couldn't force a huge amount of spiritual energy into his body. Even if he could, it would be the result of compression. Fortunately, he had the demon purification pot, so he had infinite spiritual energy to use. After becoming a venerable, the use of spiritual energy became even slower. It was no exaggeration to say that Han Fei felt that when he used spiritual energy now, he was like a person who was used to driving a supercar. It was extremely slow. To be honest, he didn't feel that the use of spiritual energy was slow before. Why did it slow down when he became a venerable? Therefore, it was inevitable to replace the role of spiritual energy. He definitely needed a new kind of energy to replace the role of spiritual energy. However, even so, the role of spiritual energy couldn't be denied. After all, among the venerables that Han Fei had fought, they all seemed to be using spiritual energy. Which venerable didn't fill their body with spiritual energy during a battle? That was what most venerables did. When they fought, they also used spiritual energy. Why was this so? The reason was probably that chaotic qi was not easy to come by. They couldn't absorb chaotic qi from the void, as they could absorb spiritual energy. Otherwise, the battle between venerables wouldn't be like what he saw. It could be seen that in the venerable realm, although spiritual energy was not enough for cultivation, it was the most appropriate. In a battle, it was the most appropriate. Venerables could exert the power of spiritual energy more, which was also related to the degree of disassembly of spiritual energy. Han Fei immediately understood the key to this and one of the reasons for the existence of the degree of disassembly of spiritual energy. If it wasn't disassembled, the use of spiritual energy would be even slower. At this moment, Han Fei felt that the spiritual energy in his body was changing. A large amount of spiritual energy began to be automatically disassembled. In his spiritual heritage, the spiritual energy flowing slowly began to decrease, and a strand of gray mist was forming. The old turtle said in surprise, "Are you transforming spiritual energy into chaotic qi?" Han Fei said, "Yes." "What's wrong?" The old turtle pondered for a moment and said, "For streaks of chaotic qi appeared. Your upper limit of spiritual energy exceeded 400,000 points." Han Fei thought to himself, when I became a venerable, the upper limit of spiritual energy didn't increase at the same time. The efficiency of the spiritual energy must have dropped, so the demon purification pot didn't keep up with the upper limit of its spiritual energy anymore. Hearing the old turtle's tone, Han Fei knew that something was wrong, so he asked, "What's wrong? Isn't this conversion good?" The old turtle said, "It's not that it's bad, but it's a bit fast." Usually, when a cultivator broke through to the supremacy stage, they would obtain the chaotic energy contained in the heavenly Tao laws. However, it would take several years to slowly transform it. But you've only just become a venerable, and you've already started to transform? It's really unimaginable. This was because all of this was happening within his body, just like his innate ability. Therefore, the old turtle didn't know that it was also one of the abilities of the demon purification pot. Of course, Han Fei wouldn't explain. However, he was attracted by the information revealed by the old turtle. The old turtle said that this chaotic energy was produced by the heavenly Tao at the moment of becoming a venerable and needed to be slowly transformed by spiritual energy. Han Fei was shocked. Old Yuan, do you mean that this process of spiritual energy transforming into chaotic energy can only happen once? Of course. Otherwise, how could there be such a good thing in the world if you could transform your spiritual energy into chaotic energy without limit? Han Fei was stunned. Just now, he was full of joy because as long as he was willing, the spiritual energy in his body could be almost infinite. In this case, he could obtain a steady stream of chaotic energy. But now it seemed that he was still too naive. Since the chaotic energy was so rare, how could he get it so easily? Han Fei clearly felt that the spiritual energy in his body was being consumed rapidly around the few wisps of chaotic energy. This process wasn't fast. The old turtle said that it would take others several years to complete this transformation. However, it only took him 2 hours. Han Fei pondered. Even if the time problem in Forge the Universe was ignored, it only took him 4 hours in the outside world. In other words, it only took the demon purification pot 8 hours to help him complete the process from just becoming a venerable to stabilizing it. When the 4 wisps of chaotic energy appeared in his body, Han Fei could feel that they were swimming freely in his body as if they were examining his body. Han Fei thought, if I only have 4 wisps of chaotic energy, how should I use this thing? I don't want to use them. If I don't use them, are they supposed to be used to save my life? But I haven't seen the power of the chaotic energy. Han Fei felt that the feeling of the chaotic energy swimming in his body was not much different from that of spiritual energy. It just needed to be smoother. Han Fei drove the chaotic energy with his will and tried to gather the chaotic energy on his fist. However, the old turtle hurriedly shouted, Han Fei, are you experimenting with the chaotic energy? Han Fei nodded. Yes. How can I know what it's for if I don't try it? The old turtle said, it's not that I don't mind you experimenting, but aren't you in that divine palace now? A wisp of chaotic energy can provide you with high-intensity combat power for several hours. Are you sure you want to waste it here? Hearing what the old turtle said, Han Fei hesitated for a moment and asked in confusion, a wisp of chaotic energy can provide me with high-intensity combat power for 2 hours. The old turtle nodded. Something like that. However, it also depends on how much power you exert. If you always make big moves, a wisp of chaotic energy won't be enough for you to make several moves. Hearing the old turtle's words, Han Fei smiled. Thus, this strand of primal chaos energy had sealed the power within it. In this way, he could use this power at the critical moment instead of in the form of spiritual energy. This was equivalent to creating a trump card for himself. Although Han Fei understood the chaotic energy, what was its specific combat effect? Han Fei didn't know yet. In fact, Han Fei didn't mind wasting a wisp first, but not now. While Han Fei was thinking about the chaotic energy, Forge the Universe trembled slightly. Immediately afterward, Han Fei saw more blue lines appear outside the boundary of Forge the Universe. Han Fei quickly looked at the demon purification pot and saw the number 4128. Behind it, the words upgradable were still hanging. Han Fei clicked on it and saw the consumption of 10 wisps of chaotic energy. Han Fei felt a headache, as if he had returned to the fisherman's realm. In order to get a little spiritual energy, he had to do everything he could. Wasn't he also short of chaotic energy now? But now, fortunately, Little White was here. Although 10 wisps of chaotic energy was a lot, it must be worth it. Han Fei was still not sure about the pattern of the time chain, so he couldn't make a conclusion. However, 4 times the time could shorten a lot of time. Similarly, if the strength of a venerable was doubled, it would take him 30 years of seclusion to cultivate normally, even at his speed. If it were an ordinary person, it wouldn't take him 50 years to double his strength. Han Fei felt that this was also the reason why most venerables grew extremely slowly. Doubling strength sounded scary, but in the venerable realm, one step at a time was a different world. Maybe his strength had already doubled without changing his realm, and Han Fei could at least shorten this time to more than 7 years. This was already a miracle. Of course, in terms of Han Fei's personality, even a year was a long time, let alone 7 years. It took him 7 years to become a venerable from a law enforcer. How could he have the time to cultivate in seclusion? Han Fei sat quietly for half an hour to clear his mind. Emperor Sparrow, let's find a way to get along with it later. He had already become a venerable, and his strength had doubled. His real combat power might even make the advanced venerables flinch. However, that kind of power didn't last long. Because he couldn't test it, everything had to wait until he left this divine palace. The eye of the heavenly path, this weird eye of truth, seemed to have targeted him. God knew why this guy targeted him as soon as he became a venerable. Could it be that the monarch Sparrow's voice had called him over? Now, Han Fei knew that he could actually continue to cultivate because he had the power of hope. Han Fei thought that with the massive resources he had stored, he could easily reach the strength of a peak-level junior venerable. However, now it seemed that he was far from it. What Han Fei needed now was strength, which was why he came to the Divine Palace. But he wanted strength? It was not enough to have the power of hope and spiritual energy. He also needed energy to support it. He had to cleanse his body and make himself stronger. Just outside Forge the Universe, there was endless fire energy, which was inexhaustible energy. If he didn't have this energy, his improvement in strength would just be nonsense. Han Fei thought hard for a long time, left Forge the Universe, and continued to fight the so-called extraterrestrial demons. If he didn't leave, he couldn't improve himself. Therefore, he had to come out in the end. However, after leaving the demon purification pot, Han Fei found that his realm was still not high enough, and his strength was not strong enough. Want to surpass the 1,000 stars? That was absolutely impossible. Even if he temporarily obtained unparalleled power, it would only be a flash in the pan and wouldn't last long. Therefore, after careful consideration, Han Fei summed up 2 ways. One was to return to the central holy city, seek an opportunity, and come back. The other was the palace within the immortal palace. Since it existed, there must be a way to get in. As long as he could get in, he could set up arrays through the barrier and absorb energy, which was also enough for his cultivation. One day later, Little Black and Little White finally recovered from their state of exhaustion. Han Fei finally learned from Little White how much chaotic energy he could produce. In a month, he could spit out 1 wisp. The first wisp was converted from the power of his breakthrough. After that, he could basically maintain this amount of time. Han Fei pondered 12 wisps of chaotic energy in a year. It didn't seem to be much, and he could even deduce some major techniques once. However, Forge the Universe now had 4 times the time. In other words, as long as there was enough spiritual energy and demonic energy, Little White could give birth to at least 48 wisps of chaotic energy a year. Based on Han Fei's understanding of the old turtle and his cherishing of chaotic energy, he could roughly judge that this was a considerable number. In order to increase his trump cards, in order to make himself stronger, in order to make this trip to the Divine Palace worthwhile and not be chased away by the eye of the heavenly law like a stray dog. Chapter 1486. Swish. Han Fei stepped out of Forge the Universe, and the entire secret realm was filled with fire energy. Oh no, to be precise, this secret realm had been broken by the eye of the heavenly path. How exactly was it broken? Han Fei didn't know. At this moment, the big eyeball seemed to penetrate countless spaces and hung directly above his head. But it seemed that the big eyeball was not looking at him. The heavenly devil bodies that chased after Han Fei earlier also dissipated because they lost track of Han Fei. Even the eye of the heavenly path couldn't see. How did Han Fei disappear? Or, at this moment, the eye of the heavenly path was like a robot. Once the enemy was gone, the crisis would naturally be resolved. It wouldn't ask whether the enemy was dead or not. Where did he escape to? Questions like these, even if the enemy appeared again, it didn't immediately look at him. It seemed to have forgotten what had happened just now. Or perhaps it just ignored an enemy like Han Fei. After all, Han Fei was just a venerable now, not worthy of its attention. Even so, the heavenly demons were still condensing. Although it didn't look at him, it didn't mean that it wouldn't attack Han Fei. Seeing that the eye of the heavenly path was not looking at him, Han Fei breathed a sigh of relief, and his eyes lit up. At this moment, Han Fei directly came to the huge corpse of the ancient azure dragon with a star transposition. Collect. Han Fei's Forge the Universe at this moment, after continuous expansion, had become very large. An ancient azure dragon's corpse was still big enough. Fortunately, this ancient dragon's corpse was just a skeleton without any signs of life. Otherwise, if such a thing were to enter Forge the Universe, Han Fei wouldn't be able to gather enough resources to put it into Forge the Universe. Han Fei's speed was already very fast. From appearing to collecting the ancient dragon's corpse, it only took Han Fei 3 seconds. 3 seconds were basically the time taken by Forge the Universe to collect the ancient dragon's corpse. And during this period, in front of Han Fei's eyes, those so-called heavenly demons reappeared. This time, Han Fei tried to directly rush out of the entrance of this secret realm. However, since these so-called heavenly demons were born, there was no reason to retreat. Countless fists smashed to Han Fei. Boom, boom. Han Fei also punched furiously, bombarding the sky. A hole was blasted open in the gray secret realm, leading to the outside world. Whoosh! When Han Fei appeared in the outside world, the extraterrestrial demons followed him like shadows. In the outside world, the heavenly Tao Dharma, I was gurgling with tears of lava. Not long after the lava fell, it evaporated into endless fire elements, as if it could burn the entire universe. Noticing the change of the eye of heavenly path, Han Fei was slightly surprised. Was it the same eye of heavenly path that he saw in the treasure trove? Why is it different? Han Fei slapped his forehead and suddenly realized that the eye of heaven's path could observe every place in this world, and he could only see it through different environments. Therefore, it was normal for it to have different appearances. Therefore, what he saw was still the same. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. When the power swept over, Han Fei didn't fight back, but escaped in an instant with his speed and talent. The most important reason was that this battle was not taking place in the void, but on top of the Immortal Palace. After all, the Yin-Yang Sky General was his home. Did he destroy his own home just to fight with something that didn't even exist? No matter how he did it, he would always lose money. It was also thanks to his strength, which was far beyond the realm he showed. Han Fei easily got rid of the group of extraterrestrial demons and was already looking for the entrance to the Immortal Palace. Damn it, we've got all the source water. Can you at least open the door? Han Fei tried to open the barrier while fighting. He thought that after fusing with the source water, he could go in. However, it still didn't work. Han Fei wondered, if this Immortal Palace is not for me, then who is it for? Old Han? My sister? In less than 10 minutes, Han Fei had blown up dozens of extraterrestrial demons. Fortunately, these extraterrestrial demons were just the lowest level extraterrestrial demons that the old turtle said could only fight with brute force. If these extraterrestrial demons could be killed with spiritual power, Han Fei wouldn't dare to wander around in the Immortal Palace with so many people. The old turtle said, "It seems that the eye of the heavenly law doesn't take you seriously." Han Fei sneered. "It's just that my realm is too low to make it feel threatened. If it were a half-king, I'm afraid this thing would have to fight in person." After walking around the palace hundreds of times, Han Fei suddenly had a flash of inspiration. Yes, this palace has a circular appearance. This is not surprising, but this shape really made Han Fei's imagination run wild. Yin-Yang Sky, Yin-Yang Sky. F***CK, are you kidding me? With a thought, the supreme Yin-Yang image appeared. The moment the supreme Yin-Yang image appeared, it rotated, and right in front of Han Fei, a Yin and Yang gate appeared out of thin air. Smack! Han Fei slapped his forehead. I'm really stupid. This place is called Yin-Yang Sky. The switch here must be related to yin and yang. Even if he lost one of them, he wouldn't be able to enter. At this moment, as soon as the supreme yin-yang image appeared, Han Fei immediately went in through the gate. The moment Han Fei entered the palace, the whole world seemed to be quiet all of a sudden. Outside the restriction, the violent energy and spiritual qi were unable to penetrate the restriction at all. In this restriction, spiritual energy was abundant, and the energy was not weak at all. It was even richer than outside the restriction. Han Fei was not in a hurry to cultivate. Since he had come in, he had to take a walk. If there was no accident, this should be his home, right? After entering this restriction, Han Fei clearly saw the scene inside this restriction. Although the pavilions, terraces, and towers were not like the classical buildings he knew, they had a different style. Very similar to the Waterwood Immortal Palace, there were land, trees, and rocks inside this restriction. It was said to be a palace, but at this moment, it looked more like a courtyard. From the layout of the courtyard, the small bridge, the flowing water, the flowers and trees, and the quietly standing pavilions, they all complemented each other. This scene made Han Fei feel the beauty of nature and ecology of the integration of nature and man. Among them, what attracted his attention the most was the palace-like pavilion he saw outside. This pavilion did not occupy a large area, like a large villa standing in a natural fairyland. The structure and decoration of the pavilion were integrated with some style elements of the Age of Chaos. It seemed to be closer to nature. Along the milky white sandstone pavement, Han Fei soon came to the center of the courtyard of the small building. The door of the small building was completely open, as if it didn't care who entered. Seeing that it was quiet all around, Han Fei walked into the building naturally. The small building was divided into a front and a back, with 2 floors. Below, Han Fei saw some decorative furnishings and some papers on a table. On a side table in a corner, he also saw 2 ancient books and a fish skin map scattered. Han Fei strode over and opened the fish skin map, on which there was a complex pattern of a pestle. Han Fei couldn't help looking at the restriction outside the courtyard. Is this pestle controlling this restriction? Han Fei put down the fish skin map, picked up the 2 books, and casually read them, only to find that they were just some miscellaneous information before the Age of Chaos. Also, it was obvious that they were not written by me. They seemed to be from the human world, talking about the appearance of some heroes in the Age of Chaos. How did people fight against the Sea Clan? Dropping the 2 books, Han Fei walked to the table, wondering what he had written. But it was not words at all, but 2 small fish, one black and one white. Han Fei stared at them for a while, and the yin-yang fish above seemed to begin to move again, attracting Han Fei's attention. This is the yin-yang fish map, also known as the nature map. With this map, you can cultivate spiritual power by visualizing it every day. While Han Fei was staring at the map in a daze, he suddenly heard a soft voice next to him. At this time, Han Fei tilted his head, only to see a beautiful woman in white, with loose hair, looking at him with a gentle face. The old turtle exclaimed, "I didn't notice anyone approaching." This beautiful woman seemed to be able to see through Han Fei. Reaching out and pointing, the old turtle's voice disappeared without a trace. Needless to say, he was sealed again. Anyone who could see the old turtle was basically capable of killing him, but there was no need to do so. Han Fei knew what the beautiful woman did, but he still said in a daze, I. The beautiful woman smiled. "Do I look old?" Han Fei shook his head quickly. "Of course not. You don't look old at all. You look like a little girl." "Puff," the beautiful woman said lightly. "You should have guessed that I'm just a projection now, right?" Han Fei nodded. Of course he could. If she were here in person, she would have appeared a long time ago. Before Han Fei asked anything, she looked at the yin-yang fish map and said, "If there is yang, there is yin." People also have 2 sides, one yin and one yang. Yin and yang are also called yin and yang. The combination of yin and yang is the origin of all things. This is the origin of the yin-yang sky. Han Fei couldn't help but stretch out his hand and scratch his head. And then, Han Fei's mother said, "In the beginning, all the Taoists were the Tao of yin and yang. Whether it is the heavenly Tao, the earthly Tao, or the human Tao. Everything had two sides, and they were constantly changing, so there was a certain connection between them. The Tao of yin and yang is reflected in these Taos. Han Fei was puzzled. However, Han Fei's mother just said these words and then said, the 36 Xuantians actually represent the 36 great Taos. Every family thinks that they are the strongest. From the initial convergence to the later division, they fight separately. This is the root cause of the destruction of the various immortal palaces. Han Fei asked, then what is the ranking of the Tao of yin and yang? Old Mother smiled faintly. There's no specific ranking. I think it should be ranked first, but the consensus of the world can only be ranked ninth. So, don't care what others think. What you have to do is to walk out of the yin-yang sky as soon as possible and integrate the 36 Xuantians. Wow, Han Fei couldn't help but take a breath. I don't even understand the yin-yang sky. The problem of the sea race hasn't been solved yet. Now, they are already thinking about integrating the 36 Xuantians. Isn't this a bit too much? Seeing that Han Fei was stunned, she said, just try your best. Even if you can't integrate them, you have to have the ability to protect yourself and the peace of one side. In the past, some people went east to search for the world. Some people defended and fought their way out of the 36 Xuantians. However, with the erosion of time, the 36 Xuantians are no longer what they used to be. If you don't want to be destroyed, you can only work hard to survive. Obviously, the purpose of this mother's projection existing here was to tell him about the 36 Xuantians. Perhaps she had some feelings for him, but after all, she was not a real person. She probably couldn't be as spiritual as a real person. Han Fei suddenly asked, where are you? Chapter 1487. Han Fei asked straightforwardly. He felt that there must be a big secret behind this. His mother and old Han had paid such a huge price, even stealing time and causing a conflict with the great Taos of the universe to finally create him. How could there be no secret behind this? It seemed that since the heavenly desolation city, the trajectory of his life had been slightly deviating. He would also go to other places in the 36 immortal palaces. After all, old Han and the other parents were not there, so his sister could only be picked up by himself. Han Fei's mother looked at Han Fei quietly. This is not something you can know now. This matter is complicated. I can only say that I'm not in your era now. I'm temporarily trapped in a place. How to go back is something your father should consider. You have your own things to do. Han Fei frowned. Am I still a chess piece? His mother shook her head. You have never been a chess piece. It's just that fate has destined you to take a path. What is the scenery on this path like? Whether it was me or your father, we have no way of knowing. From the moment you left the yin-yang heaven, this was your own path. Han Fei shrugged. It was said that fate was fickle, but his fate seemed to be doomed. However, he didn't care about this now. Compared to him, old Han and his mother should have paid an unimaginable price. Otherwise, the yin-yang heaven wouldn't be like this now. What made Han Fei smile was that his mother felt that the yin-yang great Tao was actually the strongest among the 36 immortal palaces. Of his 3 great Tao, the left and right great Tao could be changed at will. However, he was still hesitating about the middle great Tao, and he was even prepared to keep delaying it. As long as he didn't limit the middle great Tao to 1 great Tao, he would have countless great Tao. In Han Fei's view, this kind of ability was extraordinary and not something that 1 or 2 great Tao could compare with. Now that he had talked about the 36 Xuantians with his mother, Han Fei thought to himself, that's too far away. I better push myself to the peak first. Han Fei said, Mom, I have a few questions. I haven't got a golden page in the Reincarnation Ideal Palace. What should I do? Old Mother shook her head. My projection doesn't have any relevant information regarding this. Han Fei was lost for words. Mom, may I ask why old Han attacked you and the fetus with the sea quelling painting? Did my eyes deceive me? There are a lot of things that you don't understand because you haven't grown to an extremely strong level. Indeed, your eyes deceive you. Then why don't you explain it to me? That involves a big secret. It's not that I don't want to say it now, but I can't say it now. The eye of heaven's path is extremely sensitive to certain words. Han Fei thought of something. Then, can you tell me your name? I was stunned for a moment, and then I said, my surname is Jiang Lincian. In the future, if you meet someone with this surname, you must be careful. Han Fei nodded. The name doesn't sound special. However, left and right were his code names. Surname Jiang? Could it be that I'm also a disciple of some big clan? Soon, Han Fei finished his questions. Han Fei asked again, what's the relationship between me and the master of the Waterwood Heaven? In the end, I told him that the palace master of the Waterwood Sky had already fallen back then and had been hiding all this time. So, Han Fei immediately understood. That made sense. The Life Queen seemed to know the Yin-Yang Heaven better than him. But in fact, she must be pretending. She and I were not born in the same era at all, and we became kings at different times. Therefore, the Life Queen probably valued him because of the glory of the Yin-Yang Heaven. Browsing the library in the small building, Han Fei saw a large number of top-level cultivation techniques and combat skills. Han Fei immediately asked, Mom, do you know how to obtain the 7th level of the true spirit fishing art? Jiang Lincian was slightly taken aback. Do you practice an ancient method? Ancient method? Han Fei couldn't help but wonder. Does this mother know the true spirit fishing art? Jiang Lincian said, I don't know when this technique was created. At least, in the era I know, it is incomplete. Even if it has been passed down, its effect must have been greatly reduced. Therefore, at least at the beginning of the Age of Doom, the true spirit fishing art you mentioned is no longer a good technique. Han Fei thought to himself, it's not just not a good technique. When I was reincarnated, this true spirit fishing art could be said to be one of the weakest techniques. However, she continued, but I heard that there is a secret behind this technique. Therefore, the latter part is rarely circulated. If you want to find the latter part of this technique, you could go to the Taishian Heaven of the 36 Mysterious Heavens. The Taishian Heaven has always collected all the techniques in the world and is the only one of the 36 immortal palaces that doesn't care about worldly affairs. Taishian Heaven? Han Fei silently remembered this name. At least, he now had a direction. Han Fei was really afraid that the 7th level of the true spirit fishing art was the end. The 7th level corresponded to the King Realm, although he was still a long way from the King Realm. However, this meant that, theoretically speaking, he had to become a king before he could deduce the 7th level. But Han Fei had already made up his mind to deduce the 7th level of the true spirit fishing art when the time was right. He was already used to the lightning bombardment. After a moment, Han Fei was taken around the courtyard by his mother, and she said, the array of the immortal palace collapsed in the war back then. Although the restriction guarding the courtyard is not weak, you can't live here. So, it's time for you to clean up the heavenly eye. Han Fei's eyes widened. Wait, I still don't understand the principle of that big eye. How can I clean it up? Jiang Lincian said, the heavenly eye is a manifestation of the rules of the Great Way. I broke the rules, and that's why I attracted its attention. It's not difficult to get rid of the heavenly eye. As long as you move away from the place it pays attention to, it will also go away. Huh? Han Fei was surprised. You mean I have to move the immortal palace away? Outside the Yin-Yang Heaven? It will leave with me? It's the ideal palace. Jiang Lincian said, the heavenly eye has always been looking at the ideal palace, but the heavenly Tao doesn't see living beings, so it appears in the immortal palace. Moving the ideal palace was one of the methods. There is another way, and that is to find your sister and bring her back. As long as she enters another reincarnation and fuses the old body with the new one, everything will be restored. The heavenly eye will also dissipate. Han Fei was surprised. Neither of these two methods was simple. Moving the immortal palace? That's easy for you to say. But where? The Waterwood Heaven or the Wall of Death? The narrow passage of the Waterwood Heaven couldn't even cross such a large floating island. Just how many resources would it take to send a giant floating island over there? Besides, would the Life Queen be happy if he moved it over? As for the Wall of Death, well, the Black Killer King had already become a king, and he hadn't even been able to come over yet. Although he didn't know whether he dared not or couldn't come over, At least it was very difficult for him to send someone over. Did he want to send a huge floating island over? It didn't sound reliable. Besides, even if he sent it over, how dangerous would it be inside the wall of death? The floating island that he had painstakingly sent over would be gone in less than 2 days. The other way was to find Ener. However, Ener, it was still in some corner of the glass heaven. So far, he only knew the Yin-Yang heaven and the Waterwood heaven. At most, he could call it the Golden Crow heaven. Of course, with the nautical panorama, it wasn't difficult to find them. However, the premise was that he had to leave the Yin-Yang heaven. This road might take him a long time. And how could he become a king? Han Fei said, "Is it because I have the heavenly eye that I can't become a king?" Jiang Linxian shook her head slightly. Yes. However, it shouldn't be troublesome to go to the glass heaven. Don't underestimate your speed, and don't care too much about the distance. When you can become a king, these are all trivial things. Han Fei was helpless. What else can I do? I should continue to cultivate first. In any case, it would take time to become a half-step monarch realm cultivator. During this period, he could clean up the big families in the Thousand-Star City. Han Fei asked, "What about that dragon? His dragon corpse is with me. I don't have to return it to him, right?" Jiang Linxian smiled faintly and said with light steps, "In history, the human race once dominated the world and fought against the dragon race. However, this hostile relationship was only temporary. In the vast wilderness of time, any race can fight against any other race. This dragon corpse is actually not very useful to you. You might as well return it to him. After all, it's also a favor." Han Fei narrowed his eyes and said, "It may not think so." Jiang Linxian smiled and said, "It has no choice. Back then, this dragon traveled through the void and picked up treasures in the void. It just so happened that he encountered the eye of heaven's Tao, and his soul was almost destroyed. If it weren't for me, it would have died long ago. However, this dragon has guarded the immortal palace for tens of thousands of years and has repaid the favor." Han Fei continued, "So, if I return its dragon corpse to it and let it be reborn, it will owe me a favor?" Jiang Linxian smiled slightly. "Yes." Han Fei thought, "So that's how it is. The Azure Dragon probably doesn't even know that it owes a favor, and now it has to pay it back with 2 favors." Han Fei also made up his mind. In fact, the dragon corpse didn't matter. He didn't really lack divine weapon materials. This ancient dragon corpse might not be able to refine a sea-quelling bizarre treasure, so he might as well give it back to him. However, when exactly would he return it? Haha, it depended on his mood. Chapter 1488. To Han Fei's surprise, his mother's projection mark stayed in this palace for a full hour this time. Although the two of them were chatting about the secrets of the 36 mysterious heavens. But he finally found a bit of familial love. Han Fei had 2 questions in his mind. He was wondering if he should ask them or not. Jiang Linxian said, "I don't have much time. This projection will disappear in a moment." Han Fei took a deep breath, and with a thought, a small vine appeared in his palm. He didn't let the demon purification pot appear completely, because the demon purification pot was too mysterious, so mysterious that he was the only one who knew this secret. This was also the reason why Han Fei had been thinking about how to deal with the old turtle. Seeing this small vine, Jiang Linxian was slightly taken aback. Familiar. However, there is no information left in my projection. Since it hasn't been left, it means that this thing is very important and should be kept secret. Keep this thing for yourself. If the turtle in your body can't be subdued, then kill it. When saying the last sentence, Jiang Linxian deliberately removed the barrier so that the old turtle could hear it. The old turtle just felt that he could hear it, but he was so scared that he trembled all over. How the F***CK can a random person see through me? The old turtle said, "Han Fei, our turtle clan is one of the clans best at keeping secrets." Han Fei said, "What are you afraid of? Let's talk about it later." Since she didn't recognize the demon purification pot, Han Fei didn't plan to show it all. However, Han Fei then asked, "Well, which one is more powerful, the twin yin-yang spirit swallowing fish or the emperor sparrow. Jiang Linxian's pupils constricted slightly, and after a long time, she said, "It turns out that it is the fish that awakened the origin water. Your luck is much more complicated than I thought. You need to verify it yourself. No one in the world knows which one is more powerful. However, they have one thing in common. They want to be secretive." Han Fei asked, "Is there an enemy?" Jiang Linxian nodded. "When you go to the other 36 mysterious heavens, don't trust anyone. Time has passed, and people's hearts are fickle. You need to pay special attention to the Grand Pure Palace, the Wuji Palace, and the God Refinement Palace." Han Fei looked solemn. "To be singled out by me, it can only mean that these immortal palaces are probably enemies." Seeing that Jiang Linxian's body was starting to turn illusory, Jiang Linxian took Han Fei to a training field in the courtyard outside the building. It was a strange thing that was pieced together on the ground. It looked like a huge machine. Its form was naturally arranged according to the yin-yang fish diagram. However, outside the yin-yang fish diagram, there were countless layers of formations. Jiang Linxian. This is the yin-yang palace's heaven and earth natural array. It's an exquisite array formation derived from the grand beginning, yin and yang, for symbols, and 8 trigrams. On the table, there was a picture of Pestle. After I leave, you can enter the formation and experience the endless changes within. If the eye of the heavenly Tao disappears in the future, you can fully activate this formation, and its might will be able to stop a king. Han Fei was shocked. A king's attack? What kind of situation would they come under? Han Fei said, "Okay." Jiang Linxian smiled faintly. "One last thing, the statue of the sea god can be changed. If you want to enter the 36 profound skies again, your strength cannot be weak. You need the entire yin-yang heaven to hold the fort." Jiang Linxian left. Han Fei guessed that this might be the last time she appeared in the yin-yang heaven. If they met again, she would at least have the ability to cross the river of time. As far as Han Fei knew, even an Emperor Realm cultivator couldn't cross the river of time easily. However, he was different. There were 3 great paths. Why couldn't he walk on the great path of time? After she disappeared, Han Fei was amazed by this heaven and earth natural array. It was too King exquisite. It was as weird as the infinite stairs in the God's Memorial Tower. Heaving a sigh of relief, Han Fei immediately went to fetch the pestle. It was called an array pestle because Han Fei could use this array at will. Of course, the premise was that he had to understand it thoroughly. When Han Fei walked to the center of the heaven and earth natural array, he immediately felt that his body was spinning. According to the law of the heaven and earth natural array, he was sitting in the middle axis. This yin and yang array was an array that absorbed energy and spiritual energy. It was made up of countless exquisite arrays. If what she said was true, could the heaven and earth natural array resist a king? Then he could just sit cross-legged in it and cultivate, because this yin and yang array would automatically absorb the power of the outside world, and the power absorbed could be comparable to the attack power of a king. He didn't have to worry at all. Han Fei did as he said. After all, Han Fei was really dissatisfied with his realm. He thought that his reserves of resources were enough for him to reach the peak of a junior venerable. However, he ran out of energy fruits, and then he ran out of spiritual energy. Fortunately, he had accumulated a lot of power of hope before. It was a pity that he had to use all his hard work to cultivate. With a thought from Han Fei, the power of hope began to penetrate his body. In the array, a huge amount of fire energy began to gather. Outside the palace, above the sky of the yin-yang sky, a huge flame vortex with a diameter of 2,000 meters suddenly formed. A huge amount of energy was drilling into a certain point in the forbidden area of the palace. However, the infinite fire energy did not fill the yin and yang array, but went into a weird place, which was undoubtedly Forge the Universe. Forge the Universe could absorb external power, which depended on Han Fei's will. At the same time, it also depended on where it was. What was worth absorbing? Generally speaking, Han Fei put all the good things in Forge the Universe. Therefore, both the spiritual energy and the energy here were far higher than in the outside world. But now that the energy was gone, he could only absorb it from the outside. Han Fei felt refreshed, and his flesh and blood were continuing to strengthen. In his body, the four streaks of chaotic energy swam quickly. The spiritual energy tides didn't stop, one wave after another. This was Han Fei's real seclusion. He didn't expect that he would seclude himself in this way in the yin-yang sky. Time passed day by day, because the time inside and outside was different. After the fire energy flowed in to forge the universe, Han Fei had enough time to use it. In this way, about a month later, Han Fei finally completed a small breakthrough. 3 months later, Han Fei once again completed a small breakthrough, and at the same time, accumulated 3 strands of chaotic energy. 6 months later, Han Fei finally reached level 83. In the 7th month, the power of hope was exhausted, and Han Fei suddenly opened his eyes. He knew that this was the limit. Without the power of hope, it was impossible to rely on pure energy and spiritual energy. However, at this time, Han Fei had accumulated as many as 11 strands of chaotic energy. However, this wasn't enough, although Little White had been working very hard to produce chaotic energy. However, Little White couldn't be completely reduced to this production tool. Once he left the Yin-Yang Palace, he needed Little Black and Little White to maintain a good state. 1 year later, Han Fei cultivated for 5 months with energy and spiritual energy, mainly to wait for himself to save a sum of chaotic energy before leaving. A year in Forge the Universe was about 3 months in the outside world. Plus, he had stayed in the God's Memorial Tower for more than 2 months. It had been almost half a year since he left the Scattered Stars Island. Han Fei glanced at his information. Owner, Han Fei, level greater than 83, venerable, chaotic energy greater than 16 strands, spiritual power 586017, 9999, damaged, perception range greater than 15,000 kilometers, power greater than 3,688 waves, first spiritual heritage, unknown, second spiritual heritage, unknown, first spiritual beast. Twin yin-yang spirit swallowing fish, level 70. Second spiritual beast, Emperor Sparrow, level 1. Main art, void fishing, level 6. Sky stealing technique, venerable level, divine quality. Han Fei wasn't surprised at all when he saw this data. Compared with when he became a venerable, the benefits after his breakthrough were much smaller. But Han Fei didn't care. He improved fast at the beginning, but he didn't improve enough. He could make up for the shortcomings and polish his foundation well. However, he had to improve his rel first. As for the disappearance of spiritual energy, Han Fei wasn't surprised at all. Although the spiritual energy was still in use, in fact, in a sense, it was already obsolete. Swish! Han Fei appeared in the heaven and earth natural array. The old turtle said, "Why? Are you cultivating again? I told you that your realm is improving fast, but your foundation is not polished enough. You'll be stuck in the realm of a junior venerable for a long time." Han Fei grinned. "No, there is another way to speed up the improvement of strength." The old turtle asked, "Are you going to fight?" Fighting was the best way to polish one's foundation, and Han Fei's fighting method was particularly different. He could also absorb other people's vitality and soul power, which could benefit him in all aspects. In fact, at Han Fei's level, if he wanted to gain enough benefits in a battle, he had to choose venerables as his hunting targets. The old turtle wondered, "You're not going to the 1,000-star city now, are you?" "No, you can't. You're not strong enough." "Huh? Are you going to attack those sea demon venerables who escaped?" Han Fei smiled. "What do you think of my idea?" The old turtle said leisurely, "It's not a big deal. As long as they unite, you, a junior venerable who hasn't even reached the peak, can't kill them. How can you hunt 5 or 6 of them? Don't forget that the projection of the black killer snail king hasn't died yet." Han Fei grinned. "So, I still need to do some preparation work. In terms of strength, without the help of the power of faith, his progress was very slow." Han Fei regretted that when he looted the Zhang family's treasury, he shouldn't have looted the lower 5 floors. In this way, he could have gotten a huge amount of resources. As the saying went, to do a good job, one must sharpen his tools first. Han Fei closed his eyes and glanced at the great techniques he had learned. Now that he picked them out one by one, he needed to deduce them all to the extreme. Chapter 1489. Han Fei reviewed his experience during this period of time. When his body and physique became extremely strong, he didn't even like to use the draw technique and preferred to solve problems with his fists. Such a combat method was relatively simple. But the fundamental reason was that at his current level, it didn't matter what kind of weapon he used. In this case, he might as well use his fists. Therefore, the current saber scripture needed to undergo a relatively large deduction. After entering the Divine Palace this time, Han Fei found that it was not easy to defeat puppets with his fists. Therefore, the 100 Beasts' soul-suppressing roar also needed a breakthrough. Fortunately, Han Fei already knew that the next level of the 100 Beasts' soul-suppressing roar was the 100 Beasts' soul-devouring art. It should be a great art that could be used to attack and kill. Having deduced the attack technique and the soul technique, the only thing that Han Fei needed to improve was the 108 desolate god body. The cultivation of the indestructible overlord body was very difficult, but he had already embarked on this road. However, Han Fei's soul power had been overconsumed and was in a half-damaged state at the moment. In a short period of time, Han Fei was in a state of hunger and thirst. At this time, if he practiced a body-refining art at the same time, the effect might be better. Very soon, Han Fei found the art that he needed to deduce. They were the saber scripture, 10,000 knives in one, 100 beasts, soul-suppressing roar, 108 desolate god body, and finally the art of deception. The reason why he needed the art of deception was to ensure that he would be foolproof when he pretended to be someone else. However, how much spiritual energy would be consumed in this way? At least 2 billion spiritual energy would be consumed. Han Fei glanced at Forge the Universe. Fortunately, spiritual energy and demonic energy belong to the same nature and level of energy. Otherwise, the resources that he had accumulated would have been used up long ago. After a moment, the old turtle saw that billions of spiritual energy and demonic energy in Han Fei's Forge the Universe were sucked away by the demon purification pot. 3 streams of chaotic chi were even hooked away by the little vines in the process. This scene stunned him. What kind of deal did Han Fei make this time? Why does he need so much chaotic chi? It seemed that Han Fei had a big plan this time. Such a huge consumption was enough for a venerable to cross a realm, but Han Fei didn't seem to have done anything. After half an hour, many great techniques had emerged in Han Fei's head. Small blade manual, venerable level, divine quality. Note, a collection of hundreds of saber techniques and battle skills from different clans. A comprehensive saber cultivation technique that includes saber intent, saber realm, and one with the saber. The saber Dao was to send out the saber with a thought. Everything could turn into a saber. Deduction consumption. 10 strands of chaotic energy. Special note. There's only one move in the book, blade draw. This was the advanced version of the saber scripture. This time, Han Fei directly deduced it to the venerable level and divine quality. What's there to save? In the future, none of the people he would face would be simple. If he didn't have some great techniques to protect himself, his heart wouldn't be at ease. If he were to rob them, what would his consumption amount to? During the deduction, Han Fei also consumed a bit of chaotic gas. This Hinayana saber manual inherited the characteristics of the saber scripture and only used one move. However, drawing the sword became drawing the sword. If he had the chance, he would have to try it out. Of course, there were other techniques. Blade Purgatory, venerable level, divine quality. Note, a technique to control knives. Hundreds of millions of knife lights are shot out at the same time. Everything in the purgatory can be turned into a purgatory. Everything in the purgatory can be turned into a knife. As long as the spiritual power is strong, the knife will not stop. Drawbacks. Requires a lot of weapons and high spiritual power. Deduction consumption. 10 strands of chaotic gas. This technique was different from the Hinayana saber manual. If the Hiniana Saber Manual was a powerful killing technique, then this Blade Purgatory was a domain-type killing technique. As long as his spiritual power was strong enough, he could even fly 1,000 kilometers away with this Blade Purgatory. Blade Draw and Blade Purgatory were both offensive techniques, which could greatly improve his range of combat and single combat abilities. Han Fei was also very satisfied with the soul attack. 100 Beast Soul Devourer, Venerable Level, High Quality. Introduction. This is a technique created by 10,000 beasts. By learning the roars of beasts, you can mimic fierce beasts and devour souls. This is the soul killing technique, a secret technique of the beasts. Deduction Consumption. 10,000 beasts, image deduction consumption. One strand of chaotic gas. The 100 Beast Soul Devourer technique was similar to the 100 Beast Soul suppressing roar. The difference was that one used sound to shock the soul, while the other turned the sound into a beast roar in the enemy's head, as if 100 beasts were tearing the soul apart in the mind. Therefore, this was the significance of the 100 Beast Soul Devourer. The reason why Han Fei didn't deduce it further was that he had only stayed in the Beast King Valley for a short time. He might be familiar with the beasts, but he had never seen 10,000 beasts. Therefore, he planned to save some chaotic gas. At this moment, he had an offensive technique that included the soul attack. Although the great desolate body art appeared, Han Fei didn't continue to deduce it. The corners of Han Fei's mouth curled up slightly. Great desolate body art, venerable level, mid-quality, note, an ancient great technique that was passed down in the desolate era. It refines the physique into one acupoint, allowing it to devour demonic spirit chi, savage baleful chi, poison, and transform it into energy to nourish the physique. It was said that those who mastered it would be immune to all evils and poisons. Drawbacks. You may go berserk if you fight too hard. Deduced art. Unknown completion. One wisp of chaotic gas. The school of body tempering was different from other combat skills. Body tempering required a solid foundation step by step. If one practiced by leaps and bounds or practiced at a relatively high level, it would not only be difficult, but also a waste of time in the absence of a solid foundation. Finally, there was the deduced art of deception. God-deceiving technique, venerable level, divine quality. Introduction. On the basis of the art of deception, infiltrate the face, voice, and aura of the soul that is close to you. After being deceived by the God-deceiving technique, the other party will be less wary and trust you. Deduced art. Unknown deduction cost. 10 wisps of chaotic gas. Remarks. The sky-deceiving technique can confuse the other party's mind and deceive them with words. The practice of this great technique also wasted a wisp of Han Fei's chaotic gas. Although the art of deception was actually enough, the group that he was in contact with now was different. Even an emperor like the old turtle couldn't hide from old Han and the others. God knew how good the eyes of a half-king were. Since then, Han Fei had consumed a total of about 8 billion spiritual energy and demonic energy, and 3 wisps of chaotic gas. And these great techniques would also lay the foundation for Han Fei's future growth. The purpose of coming to the Immortal Palace had been achieved. He had obtained half a drop of origin water, which inexplicably helped him awaken the second spiritual heritage and the second spiritual beast, but Han Fei didn't notice the second spiritual heritage. Although there was still a massive amount of energy and an annoying eye above the Immortal Palace. However, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to get the eye of the heavenly law for the time being. If he could get rid of it, Old Han and the others wouldn't have left it for him to do. Since the eye of the heavenly law was still there, the Immortal Palace was far from being as good as he thought. Alas, the masters of the big clans still tried to enter the Immortal Palace to get the opportunity to become kings. If they knew that once they entered the Immortal Palace, they would be closer to the eye of the heavenly law, and not only would it be impossible for them to become kings, but they might also attract the attention of the eye of the heavenly law. Another month passed. Han Fei browsed through the books in the palace. Han Fei didn't need books, such as cultivation methods and combat skills. Even if the Immortal Palace had kings' great techniques, it was still a matter for kings. There were a few books that he couldn't obtain at all now, and he needed a certain amount of strength. The rest were mostly about various historical events that happened before and after the establishment of the 36 Shintian realms in the end of Dharma Age. These books were easy to obtain, and Han Fei didn't even need to do anything. In these books, Han Fei saw that in the era when the city of Yu was still in existence, the 36 Shintian realms were not only fighting with the Sea Clan, but also fighting among themselves. It turned out that before Shimen Linglan and the others, someone in the 36 Shintian realms had discovered the floating stone. Later, this news was circulated among the strong masters and had been kept secret in order not to attract the attention of the Sea Clan. Han Fei couldn't help but sigh. So, when the City of Justice was about to collapse, the secret of the floating stone had been completely exposed. Otherwise, how could the sea demons ambush in advance? Looking through the books one by one, they were all about how to save the world in the end of Dharma Age. On this day, Han Fei was fighting with those extraterrestrial demons outside the palace. After fighting for more than an hour and studying the saber drawing technique, Han Fei returned to the barrier. Han Fei smiled heartily. "Old Yuan, it's time for us to leave." Han Fei strolled through this courtyard palace for the last time, thinking to himself, the next time I come here will be when I reach the top. It was a pity that he couldn't take away the massive amount of energy and resources in the Immortal Palace. Even the power of the fire element in the outside world, he had only devoured 1% of it since he started cultivating. Did he want to move the Yin-Yang Palace away at once? It was too early to think about it. Han Fei grabbed the pestle of the Heaven and Earth Natural Array and thought to himself, should I take this pestle away, or should I keep it? While he was in a daze, Han Fei suddenly felt that some lines on the pestle seemed quite familiar. Han Fei was shocked. On the golden page he obtained in the Ideal Palace, there were the words, Heavenly Book, which he didn't recognize at all. However, on this pestle, Han Fei saw a few similar symbols or words. To be exact, there were 3 of them. These 3 words seemed to be on every page of the Golden Scroll, but now they appeared on this pestle. What's the mystery in it? Han Fei immediately grabbed the pestle and ran into the Heaven and Earth Natural Array. This time, Han Fei didn't know if he could understand the mystery, but he still had to try. Han Fei activated the Tao Seed, and with a thought, the 7 golden pages appeared in front of him. And in these 7 golden pages, a dim black light emerged, which was fabricated by Han Fei out of thin air. Han Fei stretched out his finger, used his finger as a pen, and slowly wrote the 3 words on the pestle on the dim page. The 7 golden pages of the book suddenly closed. Following that, with a bang, the dim golden page broke into pieces. Obviously, the ability of the power of Tao to create something out of nothing was still limited. But in the next moment, to Han Fei's surprise, although the golden page was broken, it didn't dissipate. Instead, it sank back into his body and didn't split any more pages. And, in Han Fei's mind, a piece of information also appeared. All things 3, unrated, incomplete. Note, it can separate one person completely and turn them into 3 people. It can also create 2 external incarnations. According to the cultivator's will, the external incarnation will recultivate from childhood. Moreover, the external incarnation is not connected to the main body's soul. Disadvantage: if the external incarnation is not connected to the main body's soul, the external incarnation will easily develop its own will. Deduction consumption: 10 wisps of chaotic gas note. According to the bloodline and potential of the master, the external incarnation can ignore the barrier of level and the tribulation of heavenly power to a certain extent. Chapter 1490, Myriad Things 3, Hiss. When Han Fei was still in the Empyrean Waterfall, he had heard Granny Yin talk about 2 legendary techniques. One was the Big Dream Heavenly Book, and the other was the Myriad Things 3. Now, the Big Dream Heavenly Book had been repaired by his father, and what he got on the trip to the Ideal Palace was the Myriad Things 3. Before, Han Fei tried his best, but couldn't find a way to create an incarnation. As a result, after a trip to the Waterwood Heaven, the water deity created an incarnation for herself with her original body. Now, he was able to create 2 more avatars. However, even if he wanted to, his soul power didn't seem to be enough. Wait. Han Fei suddenly remembered that if he let his incarnations start cultivating when they were young, wouldn't they be reincarnated? If the level of the myriad things 3 was the same as the level of reincarnation, then it shouldn't be much worse than the big dream, heavenly book, right? Indeed, if he really started cultivating when he was an ordinary person, his soul power wouldn't be consumed much. Looking at the words in the remarks, Han Fei was tempted again. The incarnations created by the myriad things 3 could ignore the barrier of level and the tribulation of heavenly power. Did this mean that as long as his original body kept growing, there would be no barrier for them? Even if his original body passed the tribulation, they wouldn't have to pass the tribulation? Han Fei browsed through it and noticed that the bloodline, luck, and potential of the host would affect the bloodline, luck, and potential of the incarnations. It was a pity that he couldn't read more, because the All Things 3 was incomplete. If he wanted to see the complete version, he needed to deduce it, which would consume 10 wisps of chaotic gas. Han Fei hesitated for a long time. The Myriad Things 3 was useless now. According to this book, the higher his realm, the stronger his bloodline, and the greater his potential, they would affect his incarnations. So, he shouldn't cultivate incarnations when he was only at the venerable level. At least, he had to wait until he became a king. He had to admit that the Myriad Things 3 was definitely an amazing, precious technique. Just like Tang Yin, who knew how many paths he had secretly paved for his reincarnation. Even so, he failed to become a king. But what was the Myriad Things 3? They were his avatars, and they could carry the fate and potential of his main body. So why did he place them in the yin-yang heaven? In the outside world, the world was vast. If you were limited to a place like the yin-yang heaven, even if you had great luck, there wouldn't be so many opportunities for you to take. The reason why he could get to where he was today was actually the result of the joint efforts of many people. Therefore, Han Fei made up his mind to put the All Things 3 aside for now. Even if one's great technique could shock the heavens, it still depended on when to use it. What kind of environment? Instead of deducing the universal 3, Han Fei said to Old Yuan, "Let's go." Buzz. Han Fei still brought the pestle of the heaven and earth nature array with him. If he didn't come, no one would be able to enter the heaven and earth nature formation. When Han Fei appeared outside the palace, those heavenly devil shadows all appeared and besieged Han Fei. Han Fei stretched out his hand and made a pinch in the air. A fiery blade was pulled out of the void by him. Whoosh! The fiery blade light slashed out and cut off all the attacks. Han Fei smiled and teleported so fast that the heavenly devils couldn't keep up with him at all. The teleportation array flickered, and when Han Fei appeared again, he was already on the 3rd floor of the temple in the central holy city. As soon as Han Fei appeared, he saw Ren Tianfei sitting cross-legged not far away, still cultivating. Seeing Han Fei's sudden appearance, Ren Tianfei couldn't help but ask so fast. Han Fei asked, "It's been 7 months. Is this still fast?" Ren Tianfei said, "It's just 7 months. It's just a nap. The Eye of Heavenly Path didn't do anything to you, did it?" As he spoke, Ren Tianfei observed Han Fei's strength and slightly frowned. "A peak-level junior venerable? How did your strength improve so quickly?" Ren Tianfei didn't feel good. Once a cultivator reached the venerable realm, it was almost impossible for them to make any progress. Every point of improvement would take a lot of time. In a flash, Ren Tianfei already knew the key reason why Han Fei became stronger. He said, "Although the power of faith can help you improve at an incredible speed, you have to improve your foundation." Han Fei sneered. "Got it. I'm not stupid. I won't blindly pursue a higher level. I'm not stupid. I won't blindly pursue a higher realm." Seeing Han Fei's calmness, Ren Tianfei was relieved. He couldn't help but ask, "So, do you have a solution to the Eye of Heavenly Path? How can you make it disappear?" Han Fei curled his lips and said, I do have a solution, but it takes time and strength. Ren Tianfei heaved a sigh. The stronger you are, the less you seem to be a match for it. The Eye of Heavenly Path is best at creating heavenly devils. The higher your level, the more powerful the heavenly devil will be. Have you ever experienced it? Han Fei thought to himself, the heavenly devils I've met are the most common ones. I think it's because my level is not high enough. So, the Eye of Heavenly Path just created 2 random heavenly devils to tease me. Han Fei said, when I'm strong enough, I'll naturally experience the power of the heavenly devils. Now I just want to know, from the Central Holy City to the Thousand Star City, do I have to go back the same way? This was the key that Han Fei cared about. If he could only go back the same way, needless to say, someone must be ambushing him. After all, old Han, Ren Tianfei, and the Thug Patriarch all seemed to be able to fight against the big families. His relationship with them was even worse. Ren Tianfei said, of course not. There is only one way to come in. However, no matter which way you go out, the Central Holy City is only so big, and you'll be ambushed eventually. Han Fei was stunned for a moment. You mean, I can go in all directions? Ren Tianfei said proudly, of course. It may be difficult to enter, but it's very easy to leave. If you want to leave, I'll go with you. I haven't been to the Thousand Star City for a long time. Han Fei quickly said, don't. It's not the time to completely fall out with the Thousand Star City. Wait for my news as to when the big families will be cleaned up. Now, I don't think they can catch me if I run away. Ren Tianfei said in surprise, so confident. Do you know that although you can go out from any corner, you certainly can't escape the perception of the venerables? There will even be half-king experts watching you from time to time. Are you sure you can escape the pursuit of a half-king? Han Fei grinned. No matter how powerful a half-king is, he is not a king after all. With that said, Han Fei sat on the ground, took out a lot of fish skin maps, and began to draw a race. One day later, outside the Central Holy City, in the God's Memorial Tower, many old pedants were looking for the entrance on the 5th floor. Someone said, this is not working. There are no traces to follow. That kid Han Fei actually has a way to remove the marks here. Someone sighed. Unfortunately, I don't know how many floors this God's Memorial Tower has. Now, at least the first 5 floors have been determined. If these old guys knew that the God's Memorial Tower had more than 200 floors, how would they react? Outside the God's Memorial Tower, indeed, many venerables in the dark had covered the entire range of the Central Holy City with their perception. Since Han Fei dared to go straight inside, he must know the way. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come. Therefore, even a fool would think of ambushing Han Fei when he came out. A venerable said, can't we put pressure on the Scattered Stars Island? Someone shook his head. Now, Han Fei's reputation on the Scattered Stars Island is too high. The Scattered Stars Island is developing rapidly. It's the same with or without Han Fei. A venerable said with an ugly face, damn it, Han Guanshu and the others are elusive and hard to find. Someone shook his head. They have concerns. If they really want to take action, they will appear. These guys are not easy to deal with. If we leave the Thousand Star City, we'll leave the Thousand Star City empty. Isn't that what they want? At this moment, old Monster Chu was sitting cross-legged in the void. Behind him, King Chu said, Ancestor, since Han Fei is not on the Scattered Stars Island, why don't we take the opportunity to destroy his base? Old Monster Chu snorted. Do you think you can destroy the Scattered Stars Island as you want? Even if you join hands with the Black Corpse Snail, that place can't be destroyed. Not only because of Han Guanshu and Tang Yin, but also some hidden masters. Do you really think they don't care about that place? King Chu nodded. Ancestor, you're right. Then we have to capture Han Fei here. No matter how long it takes, we have to capture him. Old Monster Chu said yes. This time, we have to make sure nothing goes wrong. Suddenly, Old Monster Chu disappeared into the void. King Chu followed closely behind and shouted, do it. Old Monster Chu and King Chu didn't expect that Han Fei would come out so soon. What could he accomplish in that place after only a few months? However, when Han Fei suddenly emerged from the Central Holy City, The power of the Great Way, the heavenly void, divine walking technique, the agility of wind, and the acceleration array directly made Han Fei's speed soar to the extreme. A powerhouse of the Yi family also shouted, "This boy has become a venerable. His speed is extremely fast." Old Monster Chu shouted, and a long map appeared in the sky, locking the void. In Forge the Universe, the nautical panorama was spinning. Han Fei suddenly roared, and then he launched a terrifying blow, which was comparable to the peak-level blow of an advanced venerable. Old Monster Chu was surprised. How is it possible? Many people were dumbfounded. Could it be that Han Fei also borrowed the Force this time? He could launch a peak-level blow of an advanced venerable with a single slash? And this was not enough. Han Fei flashed in the void and directly escaped from the space imprisonment. Old Monster Chu's face was dark. How did Han Fei know where the array eye was? But Han Fei sneered in his heart. Since it's an array, there must be an array eye. Unless you block it with your own great way, if you trap me with an array. Humph, I have the nautical panorama. Why should I be afraid of your array? Seeing that Han Fei was about to disappear into the void, a cold voice sounded, "Time freeze."